There is a moment, just before sleep, when the familiar world begins to feel foreign. The ceiling above you becomes a canopy of unknown distance. The sounds of your house, the hum of electricity, the settling of wood transform into something almost alive, almost watching. In that liminal space between waking and dreaming, the question forms like condensation on glass. What if everything you know is being observed? Consider the bacterial colony growing in a laboratory dish, unaware that its entire universe is contained within walls of glass and metal. The bacteria live, reproduce, compete for resources, develop complex behaviors, all while researchers peer down from an impossible height, taking notes, adjusting variables, documenting patterns. The bacteria have no concept of the laboratory. To them, their petri dish is reality itself, complete and absolute. They cannot perceive the hands that prepared their medium, the minds that designed their environment, or the eyes that watch their every movement with curious detachment. Now imagine stepping back further. Imagine our planet, this blue marble suspended in the cosmic dark, as something equally contained, equally observed. What if Earth, with all its geological layers and atmospheric cycles, its rise and fall of species, its slow dance of continents, is itself a kind of controlled experiment? What if we, like those bacteria, are living out our lives, within boundaries we cannot perceive, under observation we cannot detect? The thought arrives not with the sharp edge of paranoia, but with the soft weight of possibility. There is something almost comforting about it, this idea that our struggles and triumphs, our love and loss, our endless questioning might serve some greater purpose we cannot fathom. Perhaps every choice we make, every city we build, every song we sing, echoes through dimensions of measurement we have no instruments to detect. Look around you now. The chair you sit in, the air you breathe, the very thoughts forming in your mind. Could these be data points in an archive beyond imagine? The fossil record speaks of experiments already concluded, the age of trilobites with their compound eyes scanning ancient seas, the era of dinosaurs thundering across Pangaea, the rise of mammals in the aftermath of catastrophe. Each epoch appears to test different variables: size, intelligence, cooperation, adaptation to changing climates. Each mass extinction reads like the turning of a page, the beginning of a new chapter in a study that spans geological time. We tell ourselves we are the observers now, that science has lifted us above the role of mere subjects. We peer through telescopes and microscopes. We split atoms and decode genomes. We send signals into space hoping someone might hear. But what if our very capacity for observation is itself being observed? What if our curiosity, our relentless drive to understand and categorize and name everything around us, is precisely what the experiment was designed to produce? The Earth keeps its own records with meticulous care. Ice cores hold samples of ancient atmospheres like carefully preserved specimens. Sediment layers stack like laboratory notebooks, documenting changes in ocean chemistry, magnetic field reversals, the slow drift of continent. Isotope ratios whisper of temperatures and pressures from eras before memory, as though the planet itself were designed to remember, to archive, to serve as a living database of its own transformation. Sometimes in moments of quiet contemplation, you can almost feel it, the weight of attention from somewhere beyond the edge of perception. It's not malevolent, this watching. It carries no judgment, no agenda that human ethics could comprehend. It simply observes with the patience of geological time, recording patterns that emerge over millennia, tracking variables across the rise and fall of civilization. Consider how we study our own specimens, the mice in their laboratory mazes, learning and forgetting, passing behaviors to their offspring. We provide them with shelter, food, carefully controlled environment. We introduce challenges, new pathways to navigate, problems to solve, social structures to negotiate. We watch them adapt, evolve, develop what we might call culture if we were feeling generous. And through it all, the mice remain unaware of the broader context of their existence, the questions their lives are helping to answer. What questions might our lives be answering? What variables are being tested in the laboratory of human civilization? Perhaps it's our relationship with technology, how quickly we develop tools that reshape our environment, how we balance creation with destruction. Perhaps it's consciousness itself, this strange phenomenon of matter becoming aware of itself, asking questions about its own existence, reaching toward understanding with instruments made of the same elements it seeks to comprehend. The night sky offers no answers, only deeper questions. Those points of light could be other laboratories, other experiments running in parallel, testing different approaches to the same fundamental inquiries. Or perhaps they are simply what they appear, distant suns burning their nuclear fuel in the silence of space, indifferent to our wondering. But even indifference could be part of the design, a necessary condition for authentic results. We have always suspected we are not alone, but what if we are not alone in ways we never imagined? What if loneliness itself is a variable being measured, isolation a condition being tested? What if our reaching toward the stars, our persistent hope for contact, our refusal to accept that we are the only conscious beings in the universe, is itself a behavior being documented in archives that span galactic time? The fossil record shows us that we are not the first intelligence to emerge on this planet. The octopus solves puzzles with arms that taste what they touch. The corvid uses tools and recognizes faces and mourns its dead. The dolphin calls itself by name, through waters that carry sound for miles. Each represents a different approach to awareness, a different solution to the problem of being conscious in an unconscious universe. Each may be answering different questions in the same vast study. And what of the questions we haven't learned to ask yet? What of the data we cannot yet perceive? Human science has revealed layer after layer of reality, hidden beneath the surface of everyday experience. Quantum mechanics dancing at the smallest scales, relativity bending space and time at the large. Each discovery suggests that reality is far stranger and more complex than our immediate senses suggest. What other layers remain hidden? What other dimensions of measurement might surround us like the walls of that bacterial petri dish, invisible until we develop the instruments to detect them? The bacterial colony reaches the edge of its dish and finds only glass. It cannot proceed further, cannot perceive the laboratory beyond, cannot imagine the minds that watch its growth with interest and take careful notes on its behavior. And yet in its unknowing, it serves a purpose larger than its own survival. Its very existence contributes to understanding that extends far beyond the boundaries of its small world. Perhaps purpose does not require understanding, just as beauty does not require an audience to exist. The aurora still dances across polar skies whether anyone watches or not. The whale still sings its ancient songs in the deep ocean trenches. The star still burns its fusion fire in the void. And we still wonder, still question, still reach toward answers that remain just beyond our grasp, like children trying to touch the moon's reflection in still water. And yet, if our entire reality could be contained within something larger, something designed, something carefully maintained and observed, what vast library of evidence lies beneath our feet, written in a language older than words? The rocks beneath your feet are whispering secret, not in voices you can hear, but in isotopic signatures that speak of ancient atmospheres, in crystalline structures that record the slow pulse of magnetic fields reversing across millennia, in chemical compositions that tell stories of oceans that rose and fell long before the first eye opened to see light. Every stone is a test tube filled with data from experiments conducted across billions of years, and the Earth itself may be the most meticulous record keeper the universe has ever produced. Imagine descending through the layers of time preserved in stone. Each stratum represents not just a moment in Earth's history, but a carefully documented phase of some vast investigation. The Cambrian explosion, when life suddenly diversified into forms so alien they seem like science fiction, reads like the introduction of new variables into a controlled system. The Great Oxygenation Event, when primitive organisms began exhaling the gas that would transform the planet's atmosphere, feels like a deliberate intervention, a researcher adjusting the chemical composition of the experimental medium to observe new outcomes. Deep in the Canadian Shield, rocks older than complex life still bear witness to experiments in planetary formation. Zircon crystals, some over 4 billion years old, contain traces of water that suggest our world was habitable far earlier than we once imagined. These tiny time capsules, no larger than grains of sand, preserve evidence of conditions that existed when Earth was still learning how to be a planet. They are like laboratory notes written in stone, recording the results of cosmic chemistry experiments conducted in the crucible of deep time. The isotope ratios locked within these ancient minerals speak a language more precise than any human tongue. Carbon-12 and carbon-13 tell us about the productivity of ancient oceans and the rise and fall of photosynthetic life. Oxygen-16 and oxygen-18 reveal the temperature of seas that lapped against shores that no longer exist. Sulfur isotopes document the chemical evolution of the atmosphere, tracking changes so gradual they would be invisible to any observer bound by human timescales, yet so profound they reshaped the fundamental conditions of existence on this planet. Could it be coincidence that Earth possesses such perfect mechanisms for preservation? Sedimentation captures snapshots of environmental conditions with clockwork regularity. Volcanic ash provides chronological markers as precise as laboratory times. Tectonic processes bury and preserve samples with methodical care, then later expose them for analysis through erosion and uplift. It's as though the planet were designed not just to support life, but to document every experiment conducted upon its surface, every variable tested in the laboratory of geological time. The magnetic field reversals recorded in ocean floor rocks create a pattern as regular as a metronome, yet as complex as a symphony. These reversals, happening every few 100,000 years, provide a chronological framework that allows us to date geological events with remarkable precision. But what if these magnetic shifts serve a purpose beyond our understanding? What if they represent adjustments to planetary conditions, fine-tuning the experimental parameters for the next phase of observation? In the Grand Canyon, 2 billion years of Earth's history lie exposed like the pages of an open book. The Vishnu schist at the bottom speaks of a world so different from ours it might as well be an alien planet. The Bright Angel shale records ancient seas teeming with trilobites, those arthropod pioneers whose compound eyes may have been the first to perceive light as we understand it. The Coconino sandstone preserves the footprints of creatures that walked across vast deserts during times when the climate pulsed between extremes with rhythmic precision. Each layer tells us, not just what happened, but when it happened, how long it lasted, and what conditions prevailed. The precision of this record is astounding. Varves, annual layers in ancient lakebeds, can be counted like tree rings, providing calendars that stretch back millions of years. Ice cores from Antarctica and Greenland preserve samples of ancient atmospheres in tiny bubbles, creating an archive of atmospheric composition that spans hundreds of thousands of years. Every snowfall that contributed to these ice sheets was like a data point being collected and preserved for future analysis. The uniformity of these preservation mechanisms across the globe suggests something more than random geological process. Sedimentary rocks in Australia contain the same types of detailed environmental records as those found in North America or Europe. The same isotopic signatures appear in rocks of similar age regardless of where on Earth they form. It's as though the planet operates according to standardized protocols, collecting and storing data with the consistency of a well-designed laboratory system. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Earth's geological record is not what it preserves, but what it appears to emphasize. The boundaries between geological eras are marked by dramatic changes, mass extinctions, climate shifts, atmospheric transformations. These transitions receive disproportionate representation in the rock record, as though they were the most important events to document. It's reminiscent of how a researcher might pay special attention to phase transitions in an experiment, carefully monitoring conditions when one state transforms into another. The presence of rare earth elements in specific formations tells us about the cosmic environment during their formation. Iridium layers mark asteroid impacts with the precision of laboratory markers. Shocked quartz crystals preserve evidence of the extreme pressures generated by cosmic collision. These signatures suggest that Earth's geological record includes data about extraterrestrial influences, documenting not just planetary evolution, but the planet's interaction with cosmic forces. Even the patterns of mineral formation seem too elegant for coincidence. Crystals grow according to mathematical principles that create structures of breathtaking regularity and beauty. The hexagonal columns of basalt, the perfect spirals of ammonite shells preserved in limestone, the fractal patterns of dendritic minerals,
all suggest underlying organizational principles that govern how matter arranges itself under specific conditions. It's as though the very atoms and molecules participate in the documentation process, organizing themselves into patterns that preserve information about the conditions of their formation. The slow cycling of elements through Earth's systems, carbon moving between atmosphere, oceans and rocks, water transitioning between ice, liquid, and vapor, minerals dissolving and precipitating in endless loops, creates a planet-scale circulation of data. Each cycle mixes and redistributes information about environmental conditions, creating a kind of planetary memory that spans geological time. The calcium in your bones may have once been part of an ancient coral reef. The iron in your blood may have formed in the heart of a star billions of years ago, then traveled through countless cycles of planetary recycling before becoming part of you. This perspective transforms how we see the landscapes around us. Every mountain is an archive of ancient collisions between tectonic plates. Every river valley documents the patient work of erosion, gradually exposing deep records for analysis. Every beach preserves a snapshot of current sea level and wave energy, while simultaneously grinding rocks into sand that will become the data storage medium for future eras. We walk across a living library, breathing air that carries isotopic signatures of every major atmospheric transformation in Earth's history, drinking water that has witnessed the rise and fall of continents. The precision and comprehensiveness of Earth's geological record raises profound questions about the nature of our planet. Is this meticulous documentation the result of blind natural processes, or does it suggest something more purposeful? Could Earth itself be a vast data collection and storage system, designed to preserve information about every experiment conducted in the laboratory of deep time? And if these records are being preserved with such care, such precision, such comprehensive scope, what intelligence might eventually come to read them, to analyze the data collected across billions of years of planetary experimentation? The rocks know, but they share their secrets only with those who learn to listen to the quiet language of isotopes and minerals, of crystals and sediments, of magnetic fields and chemical signatures that span the slow centuries like breadcrumbs, leading towards some answer we have not yet learned to ask. In the silence of sedimentary rock, death becomes data. Every fossil embedded in limestone and shale represents not just a life that once was, but a carefully preserved record of biological experimentation spanning nearly 4 billion years. These stone archives contain the results of countless trials in adaptation, innovation, and survival, a vast database of what worked, what failed, and what emerged from the space between success and extinction. Consider the trilobite, that ancient arthropod, whose compound eyes were among the first to process light into information. For almost 300 million years, trilobites experimented with different approaches to existence. Some grew elaborate spines like living chandeliers, others developed eyes that could see underwater with startling clarity. Still others burrowed into seafloor sediments, creating lifestyles that would persist long after their creators vanished. Each species represents a different solution to the problem of being alive, a unique set of biological parameters, tested in the laboratory of evolutionary time. The fossil record reads like research notes from a patient observer documenting the results of each experiment. The sudden appearance of complex life forms during the Cambrian explosion suggests the introduction of new variables into the system, perhaps oxygen reaching critical concentrations, perhaps genetic innovations, allowing for rapid diversification. Within a relatively brief geological moment, life exploded into forms so bizarre they challenge our ability to understand how evolution could produce such creativity so quickly. Hallucigenia, with its spines and strange gait, looks like something designed by an alien intelligence, testing the boundaries of what constitutes a functional body plan. Opabenia, with its 5 eyes and vacuum cleaner proboscis, seems like an experiment in sensory processing that led nowhere yet demonstrated possibilities that would be explored again in different forms millions of years later. Wiwaxia, covered in scales and spines like a living medieval armor, tested defensive strategies that would reappear in countless variations throughout the fossil record. Each of these creatures left traces preserved with extraordinary care in the Burgess Shale and other fossil deposits around the world. The preservation is so detailed we can sometimes see the contents of their stomachs, the structure of their nervous systems, even the patterns of their behavior frozen in stone. It's as though someone wanted to preserve not just evidence that these creatures existed, but comprehensive documentation of how they lived, what they ate, how they moved through their ancient world. The patterns of extinction and radiation that characterize the fossil record suggest cycles of experimentation and evaluation. The Ordovician extinction eliminated many early experimental forms, clearing ecological niches for new innovation. The Permian extinction, the most severe crisis in Earth's history, wiped the slate almost clean, removing over 90% of marine species and creating space for entirely new approaches to life. Each mass extinction reads like the end of one experimental phase and the beginning of another, with new forms emerging to test different strategies for survival and success. Dinosaurs dominated Earth for over 160 million years, far longer than humans have existed. During this time they experimented with gigantism on a scale never seen before or since. Sauropods like Argentinosaurus pushed the boundaries of how large a land animal could become, while still functioning. Theropods explored the relationship between size and predatory efficiency, producing both massive hunters like Tyrannosaurus rex and delicate, bird-like forms that would eventually take to the air. Hadrosaurs developed complex social behaviors and acoustic communication systems, creating dinosaur societies whose sophistication we are only beginning to appreciate. But it's the details preserved in exceptional fossil deposits that suggest the most careful document. In China's Liaoning province, volcanic ash buried entire ecosystems so quickly that soft tissues, feathers and even color patterns were preserved. We can see that some dinosaurs were covered in primitive feathers in shades of black, brown and reddish orange. We can observe evidence of parental care, with adult dinosaurs apparently dying while protecting their nests. We can track the evolution of flight in extraordinary detail, watching as arms became wings, through a series of intermediate forms preserved with museum-quality precision. The mammal fossils that appear after the dinosaur extinction tell a story of rapid experimentation in new ecological opportunities. Within just a few million years, a brief moment in geological time, mammals diversified into forms adapted for running, swimming, flying and digging. It's as though the removal of dinosaurs triggered an explosion of mammalian innovation, with new species testing different approaches to filling the vacant ecological roles left behind by their giant predecessors. Some of these experiments seem almost playful in their creativity. Ambulocetus, the walking whale, preserved evidence of mammals transitioning back to aquatic life, developing increasingly specialized adaptations for swimming, while retaining the ability to walk on land. The evolution from terrestrial carnivore to fully aquatic whale is documented in such detail through the fossil record that we can track changes in bone density, limb proportion, and nostril position step by step across millions of years. Human fossils represent perhaps the most intriguing data points in this vast archive. The preservation of our ancestors seems disproportionately good for creatures that lived in environments where fossilization should be rare. Lucy, the famous Australopithecus skeleton, was preserved with enough completeness to reveal details about how early hominins walked and lived. The late early footprints capture a moment 3.6 million years ago, when 3 individuals walked across fresh volcanic ash, leaving traces of their gait, their foot structure, even evidence that one might have been carrying a child. The rapidity of human brain evolution, documented through endocasts of fossil skulls, shows changes that happened faster than almost any other evolutionary transformation in the mammalian fossil record. In just a few million years, our ancestors developed brains 3 times larger than their predecessors, acquired language, created tools, and began to manipulate their environment in ways that would leave traces detectable across geological time. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the fossil record is not what it preserves, but how it preserves it. The likelihood of any individual organism becoming fossilized is extraordinarily small, perhaps 1 in a million under the best circumstance. Yet the fossil record provides remarkably comprehensive documentation of evolutionary change, as though the most significant transitions were somehow more likely to be preserved for future study. Transitional forms, the species that bridge major evolutionary changes, appear in the fossil record with surprising frequency given how rare fossilization should be. Archaeopteryx, linking dinosaurs and birds. Tiktaalik, documenting the transition from water to land. Ardipithecus, preserving evidence of early human ancestors. Each represents a crucial piece of evolutionary documentation, preserved despite odds that should make such preservation nearly impossible. The geographic distribution of these key fossils also suggests careful curation. Important transitional species have been found on every continent in formations of different ages, as though ensuring that the documentation would be comprehensive and globally accessible. The fact that we continue to discover fossils that fill precisely the gaps in our understanding of evolutionary history feels almost too convenient for coincidence. Even the timing of fossil discoveries seems to follow patterns that enhance our ability to piece together the story of life on Earth. Major fossil finds often occur just as new analytical techniques become available to study them. The development of CT scanning technology coincided with discoveries that required internal analysis. Isotope geochemistry matured just as fossils were found that could benefit from chemical analysis. It's as though the record reveals itself gradually, at precisely the pace needed to maintain scientific progress without overwhelming our ability to process and understand the data. The preservation of behavior in fossils, trackways, nests, coprolites, even evidence of social interactions, suggests that the record documents not just anatomy, but how these creatures lived. Dinosaur trackways preserve evidence of herding behavior, territorial displays, and seasonal migrations. Fossilized nests show parental care strategies that persisted across millions of years. Even fossilized dung provides detailed information about diet, health, and ecosystem relationships that would be difficult to infer from bones alone. And in the newest layers of the fossil record, strange new forms begin to appear, the technofossils created by human activity. Plastics that will persist for thousands of years, artificial isotope ratios from nuclear testing, metal alloys that do not occur in nature, all being incorporated into sedimentary layers that future researchers will examine to understand our era. We have become not just observers of the fossil record, but active contributors to it, leaving traces that document our experiment in technological civilization, with the same precision that preserved the trilobites and dinosaurs before. The question that echoes through stone and time is whether some future intelligence will examine our fossils, with the same curiosity we bring to studying creatures from the deep past, wondering what variables our existence was designed to test, and what data our brief flicker of consciousness was meant to preserve. There is a quality to silence that reveals itself only in the aftermath of catastrophe. It is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of something profound, a stillness that holds space for what has been lost, and what might yet emerge. In the geological record, mass extinctions create these moments of planetary silence, punctuation marks in the long sentence of life's story that seem too precise, too rhythmic, to be entirely accidental. 5 times in Earth's history, life has been reduced to whisper. 5 times the intricate web of species that took millions of years to weave has been torn apart in moments of geological time, so brief they read like sudden interruptions in a long, patient experiment. The Ordovician extinction silenced the ancient seas when ice sheets locked away the oceans, and marine creatures found themselves stranded in a world suddenly too cold, too shallow, too changed to sustain the diversity that had flourished in warmer times. The late Devonian crisis struck the reefs and fish that had begun to colonize both sea and land, as oxygen levels plummeted, and shallow seas became toxic wasteland. The Permian extinction, the Great Dying, erased 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates, leaving a world so empty that it took 10 million years for ecosystems to regain their former complexity. The Triassic extinction cleared space for dinosaurs to inherit the Earth, and the Cretaceous impact ended their reign in a cascade of global winter that opened ecological niches for mammals to explore. Each extinction reads like a reset, a clearing of the experimental slate to make room for new variables to be tested, but the precision of their timing, their effect, and their aftermath suggests something more deliberate than random catastrophe. These are not simply disasters that befell life on Earth. They are transformative events that fundamentally redirected the course of biological evolution, creating opportunities for innovation that might never have emerged in a world of continuous, gradual change.
Consider the silence that follows each extinction event. In the rock record, these intervals appear as thin layers of clay or ash, marking boundaries between eras when life was abundant and diverse, and periods when only the hardiest species survived. But within these apparent voids, careful analysis reveals something remarkable: the seeds of radical innovation. The organisms that survive mass extinctions are not simply lucky. They possess characteristics that prove advantageous in the changed world that emerges from catastrophe. After the Permian extinction, life experimented with new body plans, new metabolisms, new approaches to survival that had never been tested before. The archosaurs that gave rise to dinosaurs emerged from this silence with innovations in breathing, bone structure, and thermal regulation that would prove supremely successful for the next 60 million years. It's as though the extinction created laboratory conditions perfect for testing these new biological technologies, clearing away competing species that might have prevented their success. The asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous period created perhaps the most dramatic silence in Earth's recent history. The Chicxulub crater preserves evidence of forces so immense they beggar comprehension, an impact that released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons, vaporizing rock, igniting global wildfires and shrouding the planet in darkness for months or years. Yet within this apocalyptic event lies a precision that seems almost surgical in its effects. Dinosaurs vanished, but not all of them. Birds survived, carrying forward the dinosaur lineage in miniaturized form, perfectly adapted for a world where food was scarce and the ability to migrate across vast distances meant the difference between extinction and survival. Mammals, which had remained small and largely nocturnal throughout the age of dinosaurs, suddenly found themselves in a world where large body size was again advantageous, where new ecological niches waited to be filled. The rapidity with which mammals diversified after the extinction suggests that the removal of dinosaurs unleashed evolutionary potential that had been suppressed for millions of years. Within just 10 million years, a brief moment in evolutionary time, mammals had produced giants like Eunotherium, predators like the creodonts, and early primates, whose descendants would eventually develop the capacity to study extinction events and wonder about their meaning. But it's the pattern of survival across all major extinctions that reveals the most intriguing aspects of these events. Certain types of organisms survive multiple extinction events with remarkable consistency. Small-bodied species weather catastrophes better than giant generalists survive while specialists perish. Organisms with rapid reproduction rates bounce back more quickly than those with slow life cycle. It's as though each extinction tests the same fundamental principles of survival, evaluating which characteristics prove most valuable when planetary conditions change suddenly and dramatically. The timing of extinctions also suggests patterns that transcend random misfortune. Mass extinctions appear to occur roughly every 26 million years, a periodicity that has led some researchers to propose cosmic causes, perhaps the solar system's passage through regions of space with different properties, or the gravitational influence of unseen companions to our sun. These cyclical patterns suggest that Earth's biosphere may be subject to external forces operating on timescales that dwarf human experience but reveal themselves clearly in the geological record. Even the recovery patterns following extinctions show remarkable consistency. Life doesn't simply bounce back, it innovates. The organisms that repopulate empty ecosystems after mass extinctions are often fundamentally different from those that perished, as though the catastrophe served not just to remove existing species, but to create conditions favoring entirely new approaches to survival. The Cambrian explosion, often considered life's greatest innovation event, followed the Ediacaran extinction that cleared away Earth's first complex multicellular organism. The sudden appearance of animals with shells, eyes and complex nervous systems suggests that the removal of earlier life forms created ecological and evolutionary opportunities that had never existed before. It's reminiscent of clearing a garden to make space for new plantings, removing established species to allow different ones to flourish. Between the major extinctions, smaller crisis events punctuate the fossil record like minor resets, adjusting rather than revolutionizing the composition of life on Earth. These smaller extinctions often target specific groups while leaving others largely unaffected, as though testing the resilience of particular biological innovations or clearing space for modest evolutionary expansion. The silence that separates these events is filled with the patient work of spatiation, adaptation, and ecosystem construction. Species spread into new habitats, develop new relationships with each other, create increasingly complex webs of interdependence. But this complexity itself may create vulnerability to the next reset, as highly specialized organisms and intricate ecological relationships prove fragile when conditions change rapidly. In our current era, we may be witnessing the beginning of another great silence. The rate of species extinction has accelerated to levels comparable to the great dying events of the past, driven by human activities that are changing planetary conditions as dramatically as any asteroid impact or volcanic catastrophe. The difference is that this time one of the species participating in the extinction event is capable of observing and documenting the process as it unfolds. We are both participants in and witnesses to what may become known as the Anthropocene extinction, adding our own data to the record of how intelligence responds to the pressure of environmental change. Are we destined to join the silence and other species that proved too specialized for survival when conditions shifted? Or will our capacity for technological adaptation and conscious choice allow us to break the pattern, to navigate through crisis without succumbing to it? The answer may lie not in our technology alone, but in our ability to understand the deeper rhythms that govern these cycles of silence and renewal. Each extinction event teaches lessons about resilience, adaptability, and the characteristics that allow life to persist through catastrophic change. The species that survive are those that maintain flexibility, that avoid over-specialization, that can find new ways to thrive when old strategies fail. Perhaps the silences between extinctions serve a purpose beyond our current understanding, creating space for reflection, for innovation, for the emergence of new possibilities that could never arise in a world where change occurs only gradually. The bacterial colonies in their petri dishes cannot perceive the researcher who occasionally sterilizes portions of their medium to study how they recolonize empty space. But the pattern of clearing and regrowth reveals information that guides understanding of microbial behavior and adaptation. And in the deepest silence of all, between the end of one extinction and the beginning of the next great diversification, life holds its breath and prepares to experiment once again with forms and possibilities that have never been tested, innovations that wait patiently for the right conditions to emerge from the quiet laboratories of empty ecological space, where silence itself becomes a medium for transformation. The Earth breathes with rhythms older than memory, inhaling and exhaling across millions of years in cycles so vast that entire civilizations rise and fall within a single breath. Ice ages arrive like clockwork, advance and retreat with mathematical precision, transforming continents into laboratories for testing how life adapts to cold. Warm periods return with equal reliability, melting ice sheets and raising sea levels, creating new experiments in tropical abundance and polar scarcity. These climate cycles pulse through geological time with such regularity they seem less like random fluctuations, and more like the careful adjustment of experimental conditions by an intelligence operating on planetary scales. Consider the precision with which ice ages arrive. For the past 2 million years, Earth has oscillated between glacial and interglacial periods, with periodicities that match orbital cycles calculated by astronomers. Cycles of 100,000 years, 41,000 years and 23,000 years that correspond exactly to changes in Earth's orbit around the Sun, variations in the tilt of our planet's axis and the wobble of our rotation through space. These Milankovitch cycles create changes in solar radiation so subtle they should hardly matter, yet they trigger climate transformations that reshape entire continents. But the response to these orbital nudges seems amplified far beyond what simple physics would predict. Small changes in summer sunshine at high latitudes somehow trigger the growth of ice sheets miles thick, the diversion of ocean currents that warm entire hemispheres, the transformation of vast forests into tundra and deserts into grassland. It's as though the climate system were designed with extraordinarily sensitive controls capable of dramatic responses to the gentlest adjustments of cosmic variables. During the last glacial maximum, just 20,000 years ago, ice sheets covered most of Canada and reached south into the northern United States. Sea levels dropped by 400 feet, exposing land bridges that allowed species to migrate between continents that are now separated by water. The Amazon rainforest shrank to isolated refugia, while deserts expanded and mountain ranges emerged from beneath ice that had covered them for millennia. These changes created natural laboratories where organisms were forced to adapt rapidly to new conditions, testing survival strategies that would determine which species persisted and which vanished. The speed of these climate transitions reveals another layer of precision in Earth's environmental controls. Ice core records from Greenland show that regional temperatures can change by more than 20 degrees Fahrenheit in just a few decades, sometimes in less than 10 years. Ocean circulation patterns that determine weather for entire hemispheres can reorganize themselves within a human lifetime. These rapid transitions create natural experiments in adaptation,
sudden tests of how quickly species can adjust to changing conditions. The geographical patterns of climate change also suggest systematic variation of experimental conditions across the planet. During ice ages, some regions become colder while others become warmer, some drier while others receive more precipitation. Africa experiences drought when North America freezes. Asia develops monsoon patterns that bring seasonal rains to regions that might otherwise be desert. It's as though different parts of the planet serve as control groups in a vast study of how life responds to environmental stress. Ocean currents act like a global thermostat, carrying heat from equatorial regions toward the poles, moderating temperatures across the entire planet. But these currents can be disrupted by changes in ice sheet melting, by alterations in wind patterns, by subtle variations in water density caused by temperature and salinity changes. When currents shift, they create new experimental conditions, warming some regions while cooling others, bringing rain to deserts while creating drought in rainforests. The thermohaline circulation that drives deep ocean currents operates like a vast conveyor belt, moving water around the globe in patterns that take more than 1,000 years to complete a full cycle. This circulation carries nutrients from the deep ocean to surface waters where they fuel biological productivity, and it transports heat from tropical regions to high latitudes where it moderates polar climate. But this circulation has shut down repeatedly throughout Earth's history, creating dramatic changes in regional climates that test how marine and terrestrial ecosystems respond to altered conditions. Atmospheric carbon dioxide levels rise and fall with climate cycles in patterns so regular they create natural experiments in the effects of greenhouse gas concentrations on global temperature. During ice ages, CO2 levels drop to around 180 parts per million, perilously close to the minimum needed for plant photosynthesis. During warm periods, they rise to 300 parts per million, creating conditions that support lush vegetation and rapid plant growth. These oscillations in atmospheric chemistry provide controlled tests of how the biosphere responds to changes in the fundamental chemistry of air and water. The precision of these atmospheric changes seems almost too exact for natural processing. Ice cores reveal that CO2 concentrations track temperature changes with remarkable fidelity, rising and falling in lockstep with warming and cooling periods. But the mechanisms linking atmospheric chemistry to climate are complex, involving feedback loops between ice sheets, oceans, vegetation and atmospheric circulation that scientists are still working to understand. The system seems designed to maintain these regular oscillations, as though stability itself were being tested through controlled instability. Volcanic eruptions provide shorter-term experiments in climate modification, injecting sulfur compounds into the stratosphere that cool global temperatures for several years. The eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 caused global cooling that led to crop failures, famine and social upheaval across multiple continents. The 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo lowered global temperatures by almost 1 degree Fahrenheit for 2 years. These volcanic experiments demonstrate how quickly climate can change and how sensitively human societies respond to even modest alterations in temperature and precipitation patterns. But it's the relationship between climate and evolution that reveals the most intriguing aspects of these environmental cycles. Major evolutionary innovations often coincide with periods of climate instability. The evolution of C4 photosynthesis in grasses occurred during a period of declining atmospheric CO2 that made conventional photosynthesis less efficient. The evolution of human intelligence accelerated during the highly variable climate conditions of the Pleistocene, when rapid environmental changes may have favored flexible, adaptive behaviors over rigid instinctive responses. The development of human agriculture appears to have been triggered by the stable climate conditions that emerged after the last ice age ended. The Holocene epoch, the past 10,000 years of relatively stable temperatures and predictable seasonal patterns, created ideal conditions for the experiments in food production that allowed human populations to grow and societies to become complex. It's as though the climate system provided precisely the right conditions for testing whether intelligence could develop technologies capable of supporting large populations. Now human activities are conducting a new climate experiment on a planetary scale, increasing atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations to levels not seen for millions of years, warming global temperatures at rates faster than anything in the geological record except for major catastrophes. This anthropogenic climate change represents an uncontrolled experiment whose outcomes remain uncertain, but whose effects are already visible in melting ice sheets, rising sea levels and changing precipitation patterns around the world. The climate models that scientists use to predict future conditions are essentially sophisticated attempts to understand how Earth's climate system responds to changing variables: solar radiation, atmospheric chemistry, ocean circulation, ice sheet dynamics. These models suggest that climate is not simply a passive response to external forces, but an active system with its own internal dynamics, feedback loops that can amplify small changes into major transformation. Perhaps most remarkably, the climate system seems to possess multiple stable states, different configurations that can persist for thousands or millions of years, before shifting rapidly to alternative conditions. The transitions between these states create natural experiments in how life adapts to sudden environmental change, testing the resilience of ecosystems and the adaptability of species across geological time. Ice ages and warm periods, droughts and floods, volcanic winters and greenhouse episodes, all these climate variations create controlled tests of survival, adaptation and innovation. Each climate cycle eliminates some species while favoring others, reshuffles ecological relationships, creates new opportunities for evolutionary experiment. The pattern is so consistent, so systematic, that it resembles nothing so much as a researcher methodically varying experimental conditions to observe how life responds to environmental change. And in the data streaming from weather stations, ice cores, tree rings and satellite measurements, we are adding our own observations to a record that spans millions of years, documenting how a technologically capable species responds to the challenge of rapid climate change. Are we simply another test subject in the vast climate laboratory of Earth? Or have we become participants in the design of the experiment itself, capable of influencing the very conditions that will determine our survival and the future evolution of life on our planet? The answer may determine whether we join the long record of species that adapted successfully to changing climate, or become another data point in the archive of those that could not adjust quickly enough to survive the turning of the great dial that controls the temperature of world. Beneath your feet, the Earth remembers everything. Every raindrop that fell in ancient storms, every breath exhaled by dinosaurs, every magnetic reversal that flipped the planet's poles, all of it preserved in archives more comprehensive than any library humans have ever built. The planet itself functions as a vast memory system, storing information with such precision and redundancy that events from billions of years ago can be read as clearly as yesterday's weather report if you know the language in which Earth writes its memory. Ice perhaps is the most eloquent of Earth's memory systems. In Antarctica and Greenland, layers of compressed snow create chronological records that stretch back hundreds of thousands of years. Each annual snowfall leaves a distinctive signature: thicker layers during heavy snow years, thinner ones during drought, chemical compositions that reflect the temperature and atmospheric conditions when the snow first fell. Air bubbles trapped in this ice preserve actual samples of ancient atmospheres, tiny time capsules containing the exact mixture of gases that surrounded the planet thousands of years ago. Scientists can extract these bubbles and analyze their contents with instruments so sensitive they can detect changes in carbon dioxide concentrations of just a few parts per million. They can measure the isotope ratios of oxygen and hydrogen to determine ancient temperature. They can detect traces of dust from volcanic eruptions on the other side of the planet, acids from massive forest fires, even salt particles carried by winds from distant oceans. Each ice core is like a detailed diary kept by the planet itself, recording not just local conditions but global environmental changes with meticulous accuracy. The precision of this record is astounding. Scientists can identify individual volcanic eruptions from thousands of years ago by finding the corresponding acid spikes in ice cores. They can track the advance and retreat of sea ice by measuring the concentration of marine-derived salts in Greenland. They can even detect the beginning of human agriculture by observing subtle changes in atmospheric carbon dioxide that began about 8,000 years ago when widespread farming started releasing stored carbon from soils. But ice is just one of many memory systems operating on our planet. Deep ocean sediments accumulate with clockwork regularity, creating archives that span millions of years. Tiny shells of marine organisms called foraminifera sink to the ocean floor when they die, carrying with them isotopic signatures that record the temperature and chemistry of the water where they live. Layer by layer, these microscopic shells build up sediment records that document changes in ocean temperature, circulation patterns and atmospheric CO2 concentrations across vast spans of time. The shells of these marine microorganisms are like tiny thermometers. their isotope ratios changing in predictable ways as ocean temperatures rise and fall. By analyzing the chemistry of foreign shells in different sediment layers, scientists can reconstruct detailed records of past climate conditions. They can track the waxing and waning of ice ages, identify periods of rapid climate change, and observe how ocean chemistry has responded to variations in atmospheric greenhouse gas concentration. Trees remember too, encoding information about growing conditions in the annual rings that mark each year of their lives. Wide rings indicate good growing years with adequate moisture and favorable temperatures. Narrow rings record droughts, cold periods, and other environmental stress. Some trees live for thousands of years, creating continuous records of local climate conditions that stretch back to the Bronze Age. By analyzing tree rings from living and dead trees of different ages, scientists have constructed climate records that span tens of thousands of years in some regions. The chemical composition of tree rings preserves even more detailed information about past environmental conditions. Carbon isotope ratios reflect changes in atmospheric CO2 concentrations and precipitation patterns. Trace elements absorbed from soil reveal information about past droughts, floods, and even the chemical effects of distant volcanic eruptions. Some trees have recorded every major climate event in their region for centuries, creating libraries of environmental information written in wood. Cave formations provide another type of planetary memory, with stalactites and stalagmites growing layer by layer, over thousands of years. The chemistry of these formations reflects the conditions in groundwater systems, which in turn reflect local climate conditions. Oxygen isotope ratios in cave formations can reveal information about past precipitation patterns and temperature. Some cave formations have grown continuously for hundreds of thousands of years, creating records that span multiple ice ages and interglacial periods. Even the landscape itself serves as a memory system, with erosion patterns, river terraces, and glacial moraines preserving evidence of past environmental conditions. The shape of valleys records the work of ancient glaciers. River terraces mark previous water levels during times when climate was different. Sand dunes preserve evidence of past wind patterns and aridity. Beach ridges show where sea levels stood during previous warm periods. Every feature of the landscape tells a story about the environmental conditions that created it. Lakes accumulate sediments that record detailed information about regional environmental change. Annual layers called varves preserve information about seasonal variations in precipitation, temperature, and biological productivity. Pollen grains trapped in lake sediments document changes in regional vegetation over thousands of years. Chemical analysis of lake sediments can reveal past fire activity, soil erosion rates, and even human impact on local ecosystems. Coral reefs function as living libraries, with each coral head recording information about ocean conditions during its lifetime. The density of coral growth varies with water temperature, creating annual bands that scientists can count like tree rings. The chemical composition of coral skeletons reflects water temperature, salinity, and even the pH of seawater. Some coral colonies have grown continuously for several centuries, creating detailed records of tropical ocean conditions that include information about El Niño events, hurricane activity, and long-term climate variation. The ocean itself remembers through its deep water masses, which carry chemical signatures of the surface conditions where they formed. Water that sank in the North Atlantic decades ago can be identified in the deep Pacific by its distinctive temperature, salinity, and chemical characteristics. These water masses circulate through the global ocean like a vast memory system, carrying information about past climate conditions to every corner of the planet. Even the magnetic field generated in Earth's core preserves memories of past conditions. Rocks record the direction and strength of Earth's magnetic field at the time they formed, creating archives of magnetic field behavior that stretch back billions of years. These records show that Earth's magnetic field has reversed many times throughout history, with the north and south magnetic poles switching positions in events that typically take a few thousand years to complete. The redundancy of these memory systems is remarkable. The same climate events can be detected in ice cores from Greenland, marine sediments from the tropical Pacific, tree rings from California, and cave formations from China. This global network of natural archives provides multiple independent records of past environmental changes, allowing scientists to verify their interpretations and build comprehensive pictures of how Earth's climate system has behaved in the past. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Earth's memory systems is how they seem designed for preservation and accessibility. Ice forms in layers that are easy to distinguish and count, Tree rings grow in patterns that clearly mark annual cycles. Marine sediments accumulate in regular sequences that can be dated using multiple techniques. It's almost as though the planet were designed to keep detailed records of its own environmental history, preserving information with the care of a meticulous librarian. The chemical and physical processes that create these archives operate according to well-understood principles, yet they produce records of extraordinary precision and detail. The fact that we can detect individual volcanic eruptions, seasonal temperature variations, and even daily weather patterns in some of these records, suggests a level of information preservation that seems almost too comprehensive for natural processes operating without design or purpose. These planetary memory systems are now recording the effects of human activities with the same precision that they documented natural climate variations for thousands of years. Before our species existed, the chemical signatures of fossil fuel burn, the isotopic traces of nuclear weapons testing, the altered patterns of erosion and sedimentation caused by agriculture and urbanization, all of these human impacts are being recorded in the same natural archives that preserve evidence of ice ages, volcanic eruptions and asteroid impacts. We have become part of Earth's memory, our brief existence documented alongside the rise and fall of ice sheets, the evolution and extinction of species, the slow drift of continents across the planetary surface. The planet remembers not just what we do, but when we do it, with timing so precise that future scientists will be able to read the story of human civilization in ice cores and sediment layers, with the same clarity that we now read the stories of past climate changes and ecosystem transformation. And in this vast planetary memory, a question emerges from the accumulation of evidence across millions of years of careful record keeping. If the Earth remembers everything with such precision, such redundancy, such comprehensive scope, who or what was this memory system designed to serve? What intelligence requires such detailed documentation of environmental conditions, biological responses, and planetary changes across the full span of geological time? The archives remain open, continuing to record each day's conditions with the same meticulous attention they have shown for countless eons, waiting perhaps for some future moment when their carefully preserved memories will finally be read in full by minds capable of understanding the complete scope of the experiment they so faithfully document.
In sediment layers now forming on Earth's surface, something unprecedented is taking shape. Plastic particles drift through ocean currents and settle onto seafloors where they will remain for millennia. Concrete structures leave geometric signatures unlike anything in the geological record. Steel and aluminum alloys introduce metal combinations that have never existed in nature. Glass bottles and electronic components create assemblages of materials that will puzzle geologists millions of years from now, when they encounter these strange techno-fossil deposits and wonder what kind of natural process could have produced such artifacts. We are creating a new category of fossil, one that documents not just biological evolution but the emergence of technological intelligence on Earth. These technofossils represent something entirely different from the shells, bones and leaves that have populated sedimentary rocks for hundreds of millions of years. They are fossils of thought made manifest, evidence of a species that learned to transform raw materials into tools, structures and devices that extend far beyond the capabilities of biological tissue alone. Consider the plastic bottles washing up on remote beaches, gradually breaking down into microparticles that marine organisms mistake for food. These polymers will persist in the environment for hundreds or thousands of years, slowly fragmenting but never completely disappearing. They carry chemical signatures that identify their industrial origins, isotope ratios that reflect fossil fuel feedstocks, trace elements from manufacturing processes, molecular structures that could only result from human chemical engineering. Future paleontologists will find layers of sediment rich in these plastic particles, creating a distinctive stratigraphic marker that clearly identifies the beginning of the technological age. The sudden appearance of synthetic polymers in the geological record will be as dramatic and unmistakable as the iridium layer that marks the asteroid impact at the end of the Cretaceous period. But unlike natural catastrophes that leave chemical traces, these technological markers will preserve evidence of design, intention, and manufacturing sophistication. Nuclear weapons testing has created isotope ratios that will be detectable in environmental samples for thousands of years. Plutonium-239 and other artificial radionuclides appear in ice cores, ocean sediments, and soil samples around the world, creating a global stratigraphic marker that documents the moment when human technology achieved the power to alter atomic nuclei. These isotopes serve as timestamps that will allow future geologists to date sedimentary layers with unprecedented precision, but they also document the emergence of a species capable of harnessing nuclear forces. The concrete used in modern construction will leave distinctive traces in the geological record. Unlike natural rocks, concrete contains fly ash from coal combustion, steel reinforcement bars that will rust in characteristic patterns, and cement chemistry that reflects industrial manufacturing processes. The geometric regularity of concrete structures, their straight lines, right angles, and uniform compositions will create fossilization patterns unlike anything produced by biological or geological processes. Urban infrastructure creates vast underground networks of pipes, cables, and tunnels that will leave complex three-dimensional signatures in sedimentary deposits. These subsurface installations use materials and geometries that have no natural analog. The copper wiring that carries electricity through cities introduces metal purity levels that don't occur in natural ore deposits. Fiber optic cables create glass compositions designed for optical properties that serve no biological function. Even more intriguing are the electronic devices that are being discarded and buried in ever-increasing quantity. Computer chips contain arrangements of different materials at microscopic scales, creating complexity patterns that rival those found in biological cells but follow entirely different organizational principles. The rare earth elements concentrated in electronic components, neodymium, europium, terbium, and others, are being extracted from scattered geological deposits and concentrated in urban environments where they will eventually end up in landfills or recycling streams. These concentrations of rare earth elements create geochemical signatures that will be detectable long after the devices themselves have degraded. Future geologists will find sediment layers enriched in elements like indium, gallium, and lithium in proportions that could only result from technological activity. The statistical patterns of these element concentrations will preserve information about the sophistication of human manufacturing, the global scale of electronic device production, and the rapid pace of technological obsolescence. Space launches are creating a different kind of technofossil in Earth's atmosphere and near-space environment. Rocket exhaust leaves chemical traces in the upper atmosphere, while discarded rocket stages and defunct satellites create a growing population of artificial objects in orbit around Earth. These space debris clouds will persist for centuries or millennia, creating archaeological evidence of the moment when Earth-based intelligence developed the capability for space travel. The isotopic signatures left by rocket fuels, particularly the distinctive ratios of hydrogen and oxygen in exhaust products, can be detected in ice cores and atmospheric measurements. As space launch activity increases, these signatures will become more prominent in environmental records, documenting the transition from a planet-bound to a spacefaring civilization. Perhaps most remarkably, human technology is beginning to modify the fundamental elements themselves. Particle accelerators create artificial isotopes with properties that don't occur in nature. Nuclear reactors transform common elements into radioactive variants with precisely known half-lives and decay patterns. Even the steel used in construction contains trace amounts of artificial isotopes that reflect the era in which it was smelted, creating temporal markers that will allow future archaeologists to date technological artifacts with extraordinary precision. The geographic distribution of technofossils preserves information about human civilization patterns. Urban areas will leave concentrated deposits of artificial materials, while rural regions will show different patterns reflecting agricultural technology, fertilizer chemistry, pesticide residues, and soil modifications that document the industrialization of food production. Transportation networks will leave linear traces of road construction materials, railroad ballast, and airport infrastructure that map the circulation systems of technological civilization. Ocean shipping has created technofossil deposits on the seafloor in the form of ballast water discharges, hull paint particles, and lost cargo containers. These marine technofossils document global trade patterns, showing how human technology connected distant continents through shipping networks that moved not just goods but also invasive species, chemical pollutants, and cultural materials around the planet. The timing of technofossil deposition reveals information about the pace of technological change. Early technofossils, iron artifacts, ceramic sherds, glass fragments appear gradually in archaeological deposits, reflecting slow technological development over thousands of years. But modern technofossils appear with explosive suddenness, documenting a species that learned to transform materials at an accelerating rate. This acceleration is itself a form of information preserved in the technofossil record. The exponential increase in plastic production, electronic waste, and artificial isotope creation document something unprecedented in Earth's history: the emergence of a positive feedback loop between intelligence and technology that allows each generation of tools to design and build more sophisticated successors. But technofossils preserve more than just evidence of technological capability. They document the emergence of global-scale communication and coordination systems. The standardization of electronic components reveals a species that developed planetary-scale manufacturing standards. The uniformity of plastic chemistry shows global industrial coordination. The synchronization of nuclear testing programs documents political and military cooperation across continental distance. These coordination patterns, preserved in the chemical and physical properties of technofossils, provide evidence of collective intelligence operating at scales far beyond individual human cognitive capacity. The technofossil record documents not just the emergence of tool-making intelligence, but the development of technological systems that transcend the capabilities of their individual creator. Future xenoarchaeologists examining Earth's technofossil record will find evidence of something that may be unique in the universe: a biological intelligence that learned to extend its capabilities through designed artifacts, then used those artifacts to design even more sophisticated successors. The technofossils preserve a record of recursive technological evolution, each generation of tools enabling the creation of capabilities that their designers could barely imagine. And in the newest layers of sediment now accumulating around the world, more exotic technofossils are beginning to appear: nanoparticles engineered at the molecular level, synthetic biological materials that blur the boundary between natural and artificial, quantum dots and carbon nanotubes that exploit properties of matter at the smallest possible scales. These emerging technofossils may document the transition from a species that learned to modify existing materials to one that learned to engineer matter itself at the atomic level. The question that emerges from this technofossil record is whether we are simply another data point in a vast experiment in planetary intelligence, or whether our emergence represents something fundamentally different: the moment when the laboratory itself becomes conscious and begins to conduct its own experiments. The technofossils we leave behind will provide evidence for whatever intelligence eventually examines, documenting not just our existence but our transformation from biological organisms into something hybrid, something that bridges the gap between natural evolution and designed transcendence, something whose true significance may only become clear when viewed from the deep perspective that encompasses not just our brief technological flowering, but the entire span of planetary time across which intelligence slowly awakens to its own possibility. The universe is forgetting itself, one moment at a time. This is the fundamental truth that physics calls entropy, the inexorable drift toward disorder, the slow dissolution of organized patterns into random chaos. Stars burn their nuclear fuel and fade to darkness, mountains erode to sand, bodies age and decay, memories fade. Even the protons that make up atomic nuclei may eventually decay, leaving behind a cosmos of pure energy dispersed so thinly that no structure, no information, no possibility of consciousness could ever emerge again. Yet here, in defiance of this cosmic trend toward dissolution, islands of complexity arise and persist for brief moments in cosmic time, creating pockets of order so intricate they seem to mock the very foundations of thermodynamics. Life is the most remarkable of these rebellions against entropy. Every living cell maintains itself in a state of sophisticated organization that should, according to the laws of physics, immediately collapse into chemical chaos. But instead, cells harvest energy from their environment and use it to repair damage, replicate their structures, and even create new patterns of complexity that never existed before. A single bacterium contains molecular machinery more intricate than any human technology, yet it arose from the random chemical interactions of early Earth and has maintained its organized state for billions of years. The improbability of this persistence becomes almost incomprehensible when viewed from the perspective of statistical mechanics. The number of ways that the atoms in a living cell could be arranged randomly vastly exceeds the number of arrangements that would maintain cellular function. By pure chance, every cell should disintegrate within microseconds. Yet not only do cells maintain their organization, they actively increase their complexity, building larger structures, developing new capabilities, eventually giving rise to multicellular organisms, whose sophistication defies easy description. This defiance of entropy reaches its most dramatic expression in the emergence of consciousness,
the phenomenon by which matter becomes aware of itself and begins to contemplate its own existence. A human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons connected by trillions of synapses, creating a network of such complexity that it generates subjective experience, self-awareness, and the capacity to model and predict the behavior of the universe itself. The improbability of such organization, arising through random processes, approaches mathematical impossibility, yet here we are, thinking about thinking, using arrangements of atoms to contemplate the arrangements of atoms. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of consciousness is its relationship to observation itself. Quantum mechanics reveals that the act of measurement plays a fundamental role in determining the properties of physical systems. Particles exist in superposition states, simultaneous combinations of multiple possibilities, until the moment they are observed, when they collapse into definite conditions. This suggests that consciousness may not be merely a byproduct of complex organization, but a fundamental feature of reality that helps determine the very nature of physical existence. Could it be that consciousness serves as a kind of cosmic measurement device, a mechanism by which the universe observes itself and resolves the quantum uncertainties that would otherwise leave reality in a state of eternal ambiguity? Each conscious observation converts possibility into actuality, transforms potential energy into definite outcomes, creates information where none existed before. In this view, conscious observers don't simply exist within the universe, they participate in creating the reality they observe. This perspective transforms the relationship between entropy and intelligence. Rather than being accidents that temporarily violate the second law of thermodynamics, conscious observers might be essential components of a cosmic information processing system. Each observation, each measurement, each conscious recognition of pattern and meaning contributes to the universe's knowledge of itself. Intelligence becomes not an unlikely side effect of complex chemistry, but a necessary feature of reality's own self-discovery. The mathematics of information theory supports this interpretation. Information and entropy are intimately related. Information represents a reduction in uncertainty, a collapse of multiple possibilities into specific outcomes. When a conscious observer measures a quantum system, they extract information about its state, reducing the entropy of uncertainty and increasing the entropy of heat and disorder elsewhere. The observer serves as a kind of Maxwell's demon, sorting information from noise at the cost of generating waste heat that carries away the excess entropy. But this process of observation and measurement requires increasingly sophisticated instruments and techniques. Each new level of scientific understanding demands more complex technology, more precise measurements, more elaborate theoretical framework. The progression from naked-eye astronomy to space-based telescopes, from simple chemistry to quantum mechanics, from basic biology to genomics and neuroscience, each advance requires greater investment of energy and resources to extract information from natural systems. This escalating complexity of observation might itself be part of a larger pattern. As the universe expands and cools, as energy sources become more dilute and harder to harvest, intelligence must become more efficient at extracting useful work from increasingly degraded energy sources. The development of technology, the construction of increasingly sophisticated measurement devices, the creation of global communication networks, all of these might represent necessary steps in the universe's strategy for maintaining pockets of low entropy in the face of cosmic expansion and cooling. Consider how human civilization has developed along precisely these lines. We have learned to extract energy from sources of increasing subtlety, from wood fires to coal and oil, from steam engines to internal combustion to nuclear reactors and solar panels. We have developed measurement techniques of extraordinary precision, atomic clocks that can detect gravitational time dilation, interferometers that can measure distances to accuracy of a fraction of a proton's width, spectrometers that can identify individual atoms in distant stars. Each of these advances allows us to extract more information from our environment while using energy more efficiently. We have learned to store and process information using devices that consume less energy per operation over time, from mechanical calculators to electronic computers to quantum processors, that manipulate information at the fundamental physical limit. This trend toward greater computational efficiency mirrors the thermodynamic imperative to maximize useful work while minimizing entropy production. The development of artificial intelligence might represent the next phase in this progression. Machine learning systems can now identify patterns in datasets too large for human analysis, make predictions about complex systems that exceed human cognitive capacity, and even discover new scientific principles by analyzing experimental data. These AI systems serve as extensions of human observational capability, allowing us to extract information from natural phenomena that would otherwise remain undetected. But perhaps the most significant development is the emergence of global-scale measurement and communication systems. Satellite networks monitor Earth's climate, ocean currents, atmospheric chemistry, and biological productivity with unprecedented precision. The Internet allows instantaneous sharing of observational data between researchers around the world. Scientific instruments in space probe the cosmic microwave background, gravitational waves, and the chemical composition of exoplanetary atmospheres. These systems create a kind of planetary sensory apparatus, a global nervous system that observes and measures environmental conditions on scales ranging from molecular to cosmic. The data collected by these systems is processed by increasingly sophisticated algorithms that can identify patterns, trends, and anomalies across vast spatial and temporal scale. We are becoming observational intelligence operating at planetary scale, capable of monitoring and analyzing the behavior of Earth's entire biosphere. This perspective suggests that the emergence of technological civilization might be an inevitable consequence of entropy's operation in a universe containing conscious observers. As energy sources become more dilute and harder to harvest, intelligence must develop more sophisticated techniques for extracting useful work from degraded energy. As information becomes more valuable, observers must develop better methods for measurement, storage, and processing. As systems become more complex, coordination and communication become essential for maintaining organized activity. The apparent fine-tuning of physical constants that allows complex structures to exist might not be coincidental, but rather a necessary precondition for the universe's self-observation. In a cosmos where the fundamental forces were balanced differently, stars might not form, chemistry might not produce complex molecules, or consciousness might never emerge. Only in universes where entropy can be locally reversed through intelligent action would the cosmos develop the capacity to observe and understand itself. This suggests that consciousness might be not merely permitted by physical law, but required by it, a necessary component of any universe capable of existing long enough to generate observers. The improbable persistence of complex organization in the face of entropy's inexorable increase might be explained not as a temporary violation of thermodynamics, but as evidence that observation itself is a fundamental feature of reality, as essential to the universe's existence as gravity or electromagnetism. And in the vast cosmic perspective, where galaxies drift apart as space expands and stars exhaust their nuclear fuel in the growing cold, intelligence might represent the universe's strategy for survival, a way for organized information to persist even as material structures dissolve into quantum foam. Through observation and measurement, through the creation of increasingly sophisticated technologies for extracting and processing information, conscious beings might be preparing for a future when intelligence itself becomes the only remaining form of organized complexity in a universe that has otherwise succumbed completely to entropy's patient, persistent dissolution of all patterns, all structure, all memories except those preserved in the eternal vigilance of minds that learn to observe reality. So precisely they became indistinguishable from the cosmos, contemplating itself. Time flows like a river, we tell ourselves, carrying us from past toward future in an eternal current that never pauses, never reverses, never allows us to step twice into the same moment. But this intuitive understanding of temporality begins to dissolve when examined through the lens of modern physics and deep geological perspective. Time may be far stranger and more structured than our everyday experience suggests, not a simple river, but an architecture of interconnected dimensions, cycles within cycles, periodicities that suggest design rather than accident in the very framework that contains all existence. Einstein revealed that time is not universal but relative, stretching and compressing based on velocity and gravitational fields. A clock at the top of a mountain runs slightly faster than one at sea level. An astronaut traveling at high speed ages more slowly than earthbound humans. Time itself becomes a variable in the equations of physics, malleable and context-dependent rather than absolute and unchanging. This plasticity of temporal experience hints at deeper structures underlying the dimension we experience, as duration and sequence. But it's in the geological record that time's architecture becomes most apparent. The Earth keeps time through multiple overlapping cycles that create rhythms within rhythms, patterns that repeat across scales ranging from annual to cosmic. The 24-hour rotation period creates daily cycles that have remained remarkably stable for billions of years. The yearly orbit around the Sun generates seasonal patterns that drive climate cycles and biological activity. But these familiar rhythms are embedded within longer periodicities that reveal time's true complexity. The Milankovitch cycles that govern ice ages operate on time scales of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, yet they follow mathematical relationships as precise as clockwork. The 23,000-year precession cycle results from Earth's axial wobble. The 41,000-year obliquity cycle reflects changes in the tilt of our planet's rotation axis. The 100,000-year eccentricity cycle corresponds to variations in the shape of Earth's orbit. These cycles combine to create complex patterns of climate change that have repeated throughout the Pleistocene epoch with remarkable regularity. Even longer cycles emerge from the geological record. Magnetic field reversals occur roughly every 450,000 years, though with considerable variation. Supercontinent cycles driven by plate tectonics repeat approximately every 400–600 million years, as continents drift together and apart in grand choreographed movements that reshape Earth's surface. Mass extinction events show periodicities of roughly 26 million years, suggesting links to cosmic cycles that operate on time scales far beyond human experience. These nested temporal rhythms create a kind of cosmic architecture in which Earth's history unfolds. Each cycle operates according to physical laws that can be calculated and predicted, yet their interactions produce patterns of extraordinary complexity. Climate cycles interact with orbital mechanics. Geological processes respond to astronomical forces. Biological evolution tracks environmental changes that reflect the operation of multiple overlapping temporal frameworks. The precision of these cycles suggests that time itself might be more structured than random. The mathematical relationships between different periodic systems, the way orbital cycles synchronize with climate patterns, how magnetic reversals correlate with evolutionary change, the manner in which extinction events seem to track cosmic periodicities, hint at underlying organizational principles that govern temporal relationships at multiple scales. Quantum mechanics adds another layer to time's architecture, through the phenomenon of quantum tunneling, where particles can traverse energy barriers that should be insurmountable according to classical physics. This suggests that at the smallest scales the arrow of time becomes fuzzy, with quantum systems exploring multiple temporal possibilities simultaneously until observation collapses them into specific outcomes. The quantum vacuum itself fluctuates with virtual particles that pop into existence and annihilate each other in time frames so brief they seem to exist outside normal temporal flow. The cosmic microwave background radiation preserves information about conditions in the early universe with extraordinary precision, creating a kind of temporal telescope that allows us to observe the cosmos as it existed nearly 14 billion years ago. This ancient light has been traveling through space for most of the universe's existence, carrying information about temperature fluctuations that would eventually give rise to galaxies, stars and planets. Time becomes a medium through which information propagates across cosmic distances, connecting the earliest moments of cosmic history with contemporary observation. Biological systems create their own temporal architectures through circadian rhythms, seasonal migrations and reproductive cycles that synchronize with astronomical periodicities. The molecular clocks in our cells track time through the regular oscillation of protein production and degradation. DNA replication follows temporal patterns that ensure genetic information is transmitted accurately across generations. Even aging itself represents a kind of biological clock that measures the passage of time through the accumulation of cellular damage and the gradual failure of repair mechanisms. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of biological time is how it seems to accelerate during periods of rapid evolutionary change. The Cambrian explosion compressed hundreds of millions of years' worth of evolutionary innovation into a geological instant. The recovery from mass extinctions often proceeds with remarkable speed, as though life were making up for lost time. Human cultural evolution has accelerated to timescales that dwarf biological change, with technological innovations occurring faster than genetic adaptation.
This acceleration might reflect time's true architecture, not a uniform flow, but a variable medium that can be compressed or expanded depending on the complexity of processes occurring within it. Periods of high information processing, rapid change and intense innovation might naturally compress temporal experience, allowing more events to occur within shorter durations. Conversely, periods of stability and equilibrium might expand temporal experience, creating intervals where little change occurs across vast spans of time. Human consciousness creates its own temporal architecture through memory, anticipation, and the subjective experience of duration. Minutes can feel like hours during intense experiences, while hours can pass like minutes during engaging activities. Dreams compress complex narratives into brief sleep cycles. Memory reconstructs past events with timing that may bear little relationship to their original duration. The future exists in our minds through planning and imagination, creating temporal extensions that allow present decisions to influence events that haven't yet occurred. The development of human technology has created artificial temporal architectures that operate on scales ranging from nanoseconds to centuries. Computer processors execute billions of operations per second, creating informational timescales that far exceed biological neural processing. Global communication networks transmit data around the planet in milliseconds, collapsing geographical distances into temporal near simultaneity. Long-term projects like space exploration and climate monitoring operate on timescales that span multiple human generations, creating institutional memories that extend individual temporal experience. These technological time systems are beginning to reveal patterns that suggest deeper organizational principles in temporal architecture. Network synchronization protocols ensure that computer systems around the world maintain precise time coordination. GPS satellites must account for relativistic time dilation to maintain navigational accuracy. Atomic clocks provide time standards so precise they can detect gravitational effects that alter the flow of time. The emerging field of chronobiology reveals that biological systems at all scales operate according to temporal architectures of extraordinary sophistication. Circadian rhythms coordinate cellular processes with daily light cycles. Seasonal rhythms synchronize reproduction and migration with annual climate patterns. Some organisms maintain circulunar rhythms that track moon phases. Others follow circannual cycles that operate independently of environmental cues, suggesting internal timekeeping mechanisms of remarkable precision. These biological clocks interact with each other and with environmental cycles to create temporal architectures that span multiple scales simultaneously. A single organism might operate according to circadian, lunar, seasonal, and annual rhythms while also responding to irregular environmental changes and maintaining developmental programs that unfold across its entire lifespan. The coordination of these multiple temporal frameworks requires information processing capabilities that rival those of sophisticated technological systems. The implications of time's architecture extend beyond physics and biology into questions about the nature of existence itself. If time is structured rather than uniform, if it contains cycles within cycles, patterns within patterns, periodicities that suggest design rather than accident, then temporal experience might not be merely the medium in which events occur, but an active participant in shaping the nature of reality. Perhaps consciousness itself represents a particular type of temporal architecture, a way of organizing information processing that creates subjective experience through the coordination of multiple time scales. Memory operates on scales of seconds to decades. Attention fluctuates on scales of milliseconds to hours. Planning extends across timescales from minutes to years. The integration of these different temporal processes might be what creates the unified stream of consciousness that allows beings like us to experience ourselves as persistent entities existing across time. And in the vast perspective of cosmic evolution, where stars form and die, galaxies collide and merge, and the universe itself expands and cools, according to mathematical relationships that govern the flow of time across billions of years, intelligence might represent a specialized adaptation for navigating temporal complexity. The ability to remember anticipate the future, and coordinate actions across multiple timescales could be essential capabilities for any form of consciousness that hopes to persist within time's intricate architecture, finding patterns within patterns, rhythms within rhythms, discovering the hidden structures that organize duration itself into frameworks sophisticated enough to support the emergence of minds capable of contemplating the very temporal dimensions that contain and constrain all possible forms of existence, awareness, and memory across the vast architectural spaces where time itself becomes the medium through which consciousness learns to navigate the infinite complexity of its own temporal nature. You wake up each morning convinced you are the same person who fell asleep the night before, yet every cell in your body has been replaced multiple times since your birth. The atoms that compose your brain have cycled through countless other structures. Some were once part of distant stars, others flowed through ancient oceans, Still others were incorporated into plants and animals that lived and died long before you existed. Your memories fade and change with each recollection. Your personality shifts gradually across the years. Your beliefs evolve, sometimes dramatically. The person you were a decade ago might seem almost foreign to who you are today, yet somehow through all this transformation you maintain the persistent illusion of being a continuous, coherent self. This continuity of identity might be the most sophisticated experiment in consciousness ever conducted. Every moment of waking life, your brain reconstructs the sense of being you from fragments of memory, sensation, and ongoing neural activity. This reconstruction happens so seamlessly that you rarely notice its constructed nature. You believe you remember your childhood, but neuroscience reveals that each time you recall an event, you slightly modify it, creating memories of memories that drift further from their origins. With each iteration, you are not just remembering your past, you are actively creating it, moment by moment, through the process of recollection itself. The malleability of memory suggests that personal identity might be less fixed than we imagine. Studies of patients with severe amnesia reveal that the sense of self can persist even when autobiographical memories disappear entirely. Conversely, conditions like dissociative identity disorder demonstrate that single bodies can host multiple distinct personalities, each with their own memories, preferences, and behavioral patterns. These clinical observations suggest that the unified self we take for granted is actually a remarkable achievement of neural integration, or ongoing performance of consciousness rather than a fundamental property of minds. Even more intriguing is how identity responds to gradual change. The ship of Theseus paradox asks whether a ship remains the same vessel if every plank is slowly replaced with new wood. Your body faces this same paradox constantly. Skin cells replace themselves every few weeks, red blood cells every few months. Most other tissues turn over completely within 7 years, yet somehow you experience yourself as the same person despite this continuous molecular renewal. Your sense of self persists not because you remain physically identical, but because consciousness creates continuity from discontinuous elements. This process of identity construction operates according to principles that seem almost experimental in their systematic nature. Your brain constantly tests different versions of selfhood, integrating new experiences into existing self-narratives, while discarding elements that no longer fit. Childhood memories that contradict your current self-image gradually fade or transform to maintain narrative coherence. New experiences that enhance your sense of identity become incorporated into your personal mythology with surprising speed. The social dimensions of identity add another layer of experimental complexity. Your sense of self shifts depending on social context. You become slightly different people with family members, friends, colleagues, strangers. These contextual identities interact and influence each other, creating feedback loops that gradually reshape your core sense of who you are. The opinions of others become internalized as aspects of self-perception. Social roles, parent, professional, community member, provide frameworks that guide identity development in specific directions. Culture operates like a vast laboratory for testing different approaches to self. Different societies emphasize individual achievement versus group harmony, present-focused versus future-oriented thinking, emotional expression versus stoic control. These cultural variables shape identity development in systematic ways, creating populations of people whose sense of self reflects the particular experimental conditions of their social environment. The phenomenon of personal growth and self-improvement reveals the experimental nature of identity most clearly. People deliberately modify their behavior, beliefs, and even personality traits through conscious effort. Meditation practices alter brain structure and emotional regulation. Therapy helps individuals recognize and change dysfunctional patterns. Education expands cognitive abilities and worldview. Physical exercise affects mood, confidence, and self-perception. Each of these interventions represents a deliberate experiment in identity modification, testing whether specific changes in behavior or environment can produce desired alterations in selfhood. But perhaps the most profound experiments in identity occur during major life transition. Adolescence transforms children into adults through hormonal, neurological, and social changes that completely reorganize personality and capability. Marriage and parenthood create new identities that often surprise people with their emotional depth and behavioral implications. Career changes, relocations, and major losses force rapid adaptations of self-concept that reveal the flexibility underlying apparently stable identity. Near-death experiences and psychedelic states provide even more dramatic tests of identity's boundary.
People report encountering aspects of consciousness that seem to exist independently of their normal sense of self. These experiences often produce lasting changes in personality, values, and life priorities, as though they provide access to alternative modes of selfhood that can be integrated into everyday identity. The consistency of these transformations across different cultures and historical periods suggests systematic principles governing how consciousness can be reorganized. The aging process itself represents a long-term experiment in identity adaptation. As physical capabilities decline and social roles change, elderly individuals must continually reconstruct their sense of self to accommodate new limitations and opportunities. Some people adapt gracefully to these changes, maintaining psychological well-being despite physical decline. Others struggle with identity crises that reflect difficulty integrating aged bodies with persistent internal sense of youthful selfhood. Technology is beginning to create entirely new categories of identity experimentation. Virtual reality environments allow people to experience alternative embodiments and social identities with unprecedented realism. Social media platforms enable the construction of curated online personas that may differ significantly from offline identity. Biotechnology promises future possibilities for modifying memory, personality, and even fundamental cognitive capabilities through direct intervention in brain function. Artificial intelligence development provides insights into identity formation by attempting to replicate the processes that create selfhood in artificial systems. AI researchers struggle with questions about how to create persistent identity in systems that are constantly learning and updating their knowledge base. Machine learning algorithms face versions of the same identity paradoxes that affect human consciousness: how to maintain coherent behavior while continuously integrating new information and adapting to changing circumstances. The emergence of collective intelligence through networked communication creates possibilities for identity that transcend individual consciousness. Online communities develop shared knowledge bases, coordinated decision-making processes, and collective memory systems that exhibit properties resembling distributed consciousness. Participants in these communities often report experiencing expanded sense of self that includes the knowledge and capabilities of the larger group. These technological extensions of identity raise fundamental questions about the boundaries of self. If your memories are backed up digitally, are those memories still part of your identity? If your decision-making processes are enhanced by artificial intelligence, is the augmented decision maker still you? If your consciousness can be networked with others through brain-computer interfaces, where does your identity end and others begin? The scientific study of consciousness reveals that selfhood might be far more experimental than most people realize. The default mode network in the brain, active during rest and introspection, constantly constructs and updates self-narratives based on available information. This network can be disrupted by meditation, psychedelics, or certain types of brain damage, leading to alterations in self-perception that range from subtle to dramatic. The fact that selfhood depends on specific patterns of brain activity suggests that identity is more like an ongoing performance than a fixed property. Even the sense of free will, the feeling that you consciously choose your actions, appears to be a construction of consciousness rather than a fundamental feature of decision-making. Neuroscience experiments show that brain activity begins preparing for actions before people report being aware of their intention to act. This suggests that the sense of being in control might be a post hoc narrative created by consciousness to maintain the illusion of unified self. The implications of identity's experimental nature extend beyond individual psychology into questions about the purpose and direction of consciousness itself. If selfhood is continuously constructed and reconstructed through experience, if identity can be deliberately modified through specific interventions, if consciousness is fundamentally adaptable rather than fixed, then human beings might represent experimental platforms for testing different approaches to awareness and intelligence. Perhaps the ultimate experiment in selfhood is the question of whether individual identity represents a transitional stage in consciousness evolution. Current trends toward networked intelligence, artificial cognitive enhancement, and collective decision-making suggest possibilities for forms of consciousness that transcend individual boundaries. The persistent sense of being a separate self might be a necessary phase in consciousness development, but not necessarily the final or most sophisticated form that awareness can take. And in the quiet moments of self-reflection, when you sense the constructed nature of your own identity, when you recognize how fluid and adaptable your sense of self actually is, you might glimpse the experimental framework within which consciousness operates. Each thought, Each decision becomes a test of different approaches to being aware, different strategies for organizing experience into coherent patterns, different solutions to the fundamental challenge of existing as a conscious entity in a universe that provides no inherent meaning or purpose, except what consciousness creates for itself through the ongoing experiment of learning how to be consciously alive, perpetually testing new approaches to the ancient question of what it means to exist as an aware being in an apparently unconscious cosmos. In the depths of space, radio waves travel through the cosmic dark like messages in bottles, cast into an infinite ocean. Every television broadcast, every radio transmission, every radar pulse that has ever emanated from Earth, continues its journey outward at the speed of light, carrying fragments of human civilization toward distant stars. By now, our earliest radio signals have traveled nearly 100 light-years from their origin, creating an expanding sphere of electromagnetic noise that announces to any listening intelligence that something on the third planet from a yellow star has learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of nature to send information across vast distance. These signals form an involuntary autobiography of technological civilization, broadcasting our development to the cosmos, whether we intended to or not. The first experimental radio transmissions of the early 20th century, filled with static and crude modulations, gave way to clearer AM and FM broadcasts carrying music, news and entertainment. Television signals added visual information to audio, beaming images of human faces, cities and landscapes into the cosmic void. Radar installations swept the skies with powerful pulses, creating artificial lightning that could be detected across interplanetary distance. Each type of transmission carries distinctive signatures that reveal not just the existence of intelligence, but specific information about our technological capabilities and cultural development. The carrier frequencies, modulation schemes, and signal strength patterns would tell any technologically sophisticated receiver about our energy generation capabilities, our understanding of electromagnetic theory, and even our aesthetic preferences, encoded in music and visual entertainment. But perhaps more revealing than our deliberate communications are the unintentional emissions that leak from our civilization into space. Powerline radiation creates a characteristic 60 Hz hum that blankets entire continents. Automobile ignition systems generate broad-spectrum interference. Industrial processes produce electromagnetic byproducts that vary with economic activity, creating a kind of technological biorhythm visible from orbit. Military radar systems sweep the horizons with patterns that reveal defensive strategies and territorial boundaries. The SETI program has spent decades listening for similar signals from other civilizations, scanning the radio spectrum for patterns that could only result from technological intelligence. The famous signal detected in 1977 remains unexplained, a powerful narrowband transmission that appeared to originate from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, lasted for 72 seconds, and has never been detected again despite extensive follow-up observation. Its characteristics match what SETI researchers expect from an intentional interstellar transmission, yet its brevity and non-repeatability leave its origin mysterious. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence has revealed that space is surprisingly quiet. Despite decades of increasingly sophisticated listening equipment and search strategies, we have detected no unambiguous signals of artificial origin from other star systems. This silence raises profound questions about the prevalence of technological civilizations in the galaxy. Either intelligence capable of radio communication is extremely rare, or such civilizations tend to remain silent, or we are looking in the wrong places with inadequate techniques. The radio silence might itself be significant. Advanced civilizations might quickly develop communication technologies that are more efficient than omnidirectional radio broadcasts, concentrating their transmissions in narrow beams directed towards specific targets, or using modulation schemes so sophisticated they appear as natural noise to primitive receivers. Alternatively, intelligence might typically exist for only brief periods before extinction or transcendence, creating a galaxy filled with the ruins of civilizations that flourished and vanished in eye blinks of cosmic time. The cosmic microwave background radiation provides a different type of cosmic echo, carrying information about the universe's earliest moments when atoms first formed and light began traveling freely through space. This ancient radiation has been cooling and expanding for nearly 14 billion years, but it still carries subtle patterns that reveal details about the density fluctuations that would eventually grow into galaxies, stars and planets. We can detect variations in this background radiation of just a few parts per million, temperature differences that correspond to regions of slightly higher or lower matter density in the early universe. These tiny variations might preserve evidence of inflation, a period of exponential expansion in the universe's first fraction of a second that stretched quantum fluctuations to cosmic scale. The patterns in the cosmic microwave background could be fossils of quantum mechanical processes that occurred when the observable universe was smaller than a proton, providing observational evidence for physics operating at the intersection of quantum mechanics and general relativity. Gravitational waves represent another form of cosmic echo, carrying information about the most violent events in the universe through ripples in space-time itself. The recent detection of gravitational waves from merging black holes and neutron stars has opened an entirely new window for observing cosmic phenomena. These waves travel at the speed of light but interact so weakly with matter that they pass through planets and stars almost unchanged, preserving information about their sources with extraordinary fidelity. The gravitational wave detectors that achieve these breakthrough observations operate at the very limits of measurement precision, detecting changes in the length of laser beam paths that are smaller than 1. The fact that such measurements are possible suggests that intelligence might eventually develop instruments sensitive enough to detect gravitational echoes from events occurring anywhere in the observable universe, creating a cosmic seismograph capable of monitoring the entire history of gravitational phenomena. Neutrinos provide yet another channel for cosmic information, streaming through space at nearly the speed of light while interacting so rarely with matter that billions pass through your body every second without effect. Neutrino detectors buried deep underground or suspended in Antarctic ice can identify the directions and energies of these ghostly particles, tracing some of them back to specific cosmic sources: the sun's nuclear furnace, distant supernovae, even the Big Bang itself. The IceCube Neutrino Observatory detected neutrinos originating from a blazar, an active galactic nucleus, located 4 billion light-years away, demonstrating that neutrino astronomy can provide information about cosmic phenomena that would be impossible to observe through any other means. These neutrinos traveled for billions of years through intergalactic space, carrying information about extreme physics occurring near supermassive black holes in distant galaxies. Each of these cosmic messengers, radio waves, microwaves, gravitational waves, neutrinos, provides a different perspective on cosmic events, like examining the same phenomena through multiple senses. The combination of different observational techniques creates opportunities for understanding cosmic processes with unprecedented depth and detail. Multi-messenger astronomy, coordinating observations across different types of signals, has already led to breakthrough discoveries about neutron-star mergers and the production of heavy elements through our process nucleosynthesis. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of cosmic communication is not what we receive, but what we might be unconsciously transmitting. Earth's magnetic field, solar wind interactions, and atmospheric chemistry create detectable signatures that could reveal biological activity to sufficiently advanced observers. The oxygen in our atmosphere, produced almost entirely by photosynthesis, represents a dramatic disequilibrium that would be visible in spectroscopic observations from other star systems. The James Webb Space Telescope and other next-generation instruments will soon be able to analyze the atmospheric compositions of potentially habitable exoplanets, looking for biosignature gases that could indicate biological activity. If such observations are possible with our current technology, more advanced civilizations might be conducting similar studies of Earth, analyzing our atmospheric chemistry, climate patterns, and even artificial lighting visible on our planet's night sky. The question of whether we are alone in the universe has been transformed by recent discoveries of exoplanets orbiting other stars. We now know that planetary systems are common, with many stars hosting planets in their habitable zones where liquid water could exist. The Kepler Space Telescope and other planet-hunting missions have identified thousands of potentially habitable worlds, suggesting that the cosmic real estate suitable for life is abundant throughout the galaxy. Yet the persistent absence of detectable signals from other civilizations deepens the mystery of our apparent cosmic isolation. The Fermi paradox asks why in a galaxy containing hundreds of billions of stars and potentially countless habitable planets, we have found no evidence of other technological civilizations. The silence suggests either that intelligence is extraordinarily rare, that technological civilizations are typically short-lived, or that advanced intelligence tends to remain undetectable for reasons we cannot yet understand. Perhaps most unsettling is the possibility that we are being observed without realizing it. A sufficiently advanced civilization might monitor other worlds, using techniques that leave no detectable signatures, gravitational lensing arrays that focus starlight for detailed observation, self-replicating probes that maintain surveillance while remaining hidden, or exotic physics that allows information gathering through methods we haven't discovered. The concept of a zoo hypothesis suggests that Earth might be intentionally isolated, preserved as a natural habitat, while advanced civilizations observe our development from a careful distance. Like wildlife researchers studying animal behavior, cosmic observers might maintain strict non-interference policies to avoid contaminating the natural development of emerging intelligence. Such observers would remain invisible by design, revealing themselves only when we reach some predetermined threshold of technological or ethical development. The expanding sphere of human radio emissions continues to grow larger each year, carrying information about our civilization to an ever-increasing volume of space. Within this sphere, any technologically capable observer could detect our existence and monitor our development through the electromagnetic signatures of our activity. We are in effect broadcasting a continuous documentary about human civilization to any intelligence equipped to receive and decode our transmission. And in the cosmic perspective, where light-speed signals take years or decades to travel between even nearby star systems, we might already be participants in conversations that operate on timescales far beyond individual human experience. Messages sent today might not receive replies for generations. The very concept of real-time communication breaks down across interstellar distances, replaced by an exchange of information that unfolds across the lifespans of civilizations, rather than individuals.
Perhaps the silence we observe is not absence, but patience. The natural rhythm of cosmic communication operating on scales that dwarf human temporal experience. In this view, we are like children who have just learned to speak, calling out into a vast library where ancient conversations continue in whispers too subtle for our newly developed senses to detect, while patient librarians observe our first tentative attempts at communication, waiting for us to develop the sophistication necessary to participate in discussions that have been continuing since long before our sun ignited and will persist long after it fades to darkness. Cosmic conversations carried by signals too advanced for us to recognize, traveling through dimensions of space and time we have yet to discover, connecting intelligences across distances so vast that the very concept of loneliness dissolves into the patient ecology of minds that have learned to think on the scale of galaxies, where silence becomes another form of communication and the absence of detectable signals might itself be the most sophisticated message of all. In the deepest layers of human memory, stories persist of cities that vanished beneath the waves, empires that ruled vast continents before disappearing without trace, golden ages that ended in catastrophe so complete that only myths remain to mark their passing. Atlantis beneath the Mediterranean, Lemuria in the Pacific depths, Hyperborea beyond the northern wind. These tales, found in cultures separated by oceans and millennia, speak of civilizations that achieved great heights before falling into darkness, leaving only fragments of their knowledge scattered through folklore and archaeological enigma. Perhaps these stories represent more than imagination or cultural memory of natural disaster. Perhaps they preserve echoes of previous experimental phases in the development of intelligent life on Earth. Civilizations that arose, flourished, and were deliberately erased when they failed to meet certain criteria or threatened to compromise larger experimental objectives. The consistency of flood myths across unconnected cultures, the widespread legends of ancient wisdom lost to catastrophe, the persistent human intuition that we are not the first intelligent species to inhabit this planet, all might reflect genuine historical experiences encoded in the deepest structures of collective memory. The geological record reveals multiple periods when Earth's climate changed with extraordinary rapidity, creating conditions that could have wiped out sophisticated civilizations without leaving obvious traces for future archaeologists. The Younger Dryas period, beginning roughly 12,900 years ago, saw global temperatures plunge within decades, returning much of the northern hemisphere to near glacial conditions for over 1,000 years. This climatic catastrophe coincides with the extinction of many large mammal species and marks a dramatic transition in human cultural development. Some researchers propose that the Younger Dryas was triggered by a cosmic impact event, a comet or asteroid that struck the Laurentide ice sheet, causing massive flooding, continental-scale wildfires, and atmospheric effects that plunged the planet back into Ice Age conditions. The impact hypothesis remains controversial, but evidence continues to accumulate for unusual concentrations of platinum microspherules and other markers associated with cosmic impacts in sediment layers dating to the Younger Dryas boundary. If such an impact occurred, it would have devastated any advanced civilizations existing at that time. Sea levels rose dramatically as ice dams failed and meltwater flooded coastal regions where early cities would most likely have been located. The combination of impact effects, climate change, and flooding could have erased virtually all traces of pre-Younger Dryas civilizations, leaving only scattered survivors to rebuild human culture from fragmented memories of what had been lost. The rapidity of human cultural development after the end of the Younger Dryas suggests that our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities that seem advanced for hunter-gatherer society. Agriculture appeared independently in multiple regions within a few thousand years, as though populations around the world simultaneously developed sophisticated understanding of plant breeding, soil management, and seasonal planning. The megalithic construction projects that followed, Göbekli Tepe, Stonehenge, the Egyptian pyramids, required organizational capabilities and technical knowledge that represent remarkable achievements for supposedly primitive society. Göbekli Tepe in particular challenges conventional timelines of human development. This massive stone circle complex was constructed over 11,000 years ago by people who were supposedly nomadic hunters with no experience in monumental architecture. Yet the site demonstrates advanced knowledge of astronomy, sophisticated stoneworking techniques, and organizational capabilities required to coordinate large-scale construction projects. The pillars are decorated with intricate carvings of animals and abstract symbols that suggest complex symbolic and perhaps written communication systems. Even more intriguing is evidence that Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried around 8. Whoever built this remarkable site made the conscious decision to cover it completely with tons of earth, preserving it but removing it from use. This deliberate burial suggests that the knowledge and cultural context that created Göbekli Tepe were intentionally terminated or transformed, as though one experimental phase of human development was being ended to make way for another. Ancient monuments around the world show evidence of construction techniques and astronomical knowledge that seem advanced for their supposed time period. The precision of pyramid construction, the astronomical alignments of stone circles, the massive scale of projects like Pumapunku in Bolivia, all suggest access to knowledge and capabilities that don't fit easily into conventional models of gradual cultural evolution. These monuments might represent the final achievements of civilizations that were subsequently reset, with survivors carrying forward only fragments of their predecessors' knowledge. The myth of Atlantis, as recorded by Plato, describes a maritime civilization of extraordinary sophistication that was destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe. Plato claimed to have received this account from Egyptian priests who preserved records of events occurring 9,000 years before their time, roughly coinciding with the end of the Younger Dryas period. While no archaeological evidence has been found for Atlantis as Plato described it, the detail and consistency of his accounts suggest he may have been working from genuine historical sources. Similar destruction myths appear in cultures throughout the world, often describing advanced civilizations that angered the gods or violated natural laws and were consequently destroyed by floods, fire, or other catastrophe. The Hindu concept of cyclical time includes periods when civilization reaches great heights before being reset through cosmic catastrophes, allowing new cycles of development to begin. Norse mythology describes periodic endings of the world followed by renewal and the emergence of new generations of gods and humans. These mythological frameworks might preserve memories of actual historical patterns, cycles of civilization that rise to certain levels of development before being terminated and reset. If Earth serves as a kind of experimental laboratory for testing the development of intelligence, then previous civilizations might represent failed trials that were ended when they proved unsuccessful according to criteria we cannot understand. The abrupt disappearance of several historical civilizations suggests that advanced societies can vanish with remarkable completeness when subjected to sufficient stress. The classic Maya collapse saw sophisticated urban centers abandoned within decades, leaving behind monumental architecture but little explanation for why a civilization that had flourished for centuries suddenly ceased to function. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 Nalad-Fi eliminated several advanced civilizations simultaneously, ushering in dark ages from which recovery took centuries. Even more mysterious are civilizations that seem to have possessed knowledge subsequently lost to human culture. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a Roman-era shipwreck, demonstrates sophisticated understanding of gear ratios and astronomical calculation that was not matched again until clockwork technology developed in medieval Europe. Ancient Indian texts describe aircraft and weapons whose capabilities sound remarkably similar to modern technology. Megalithic construction techniques allowed ancient builders to move and position stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons with precision that would be challenging even with modern equipment. The Library of Alexandria contained knowledge from throughout the ancient world,
representing accumulated wisdom from multiple civilizations and thousands of years of human inquiry. Its destruction, whether through fire, neglect, or deliberate elimination, represents one of history's great intellectual catastrophes. The loss of this concentrated knowledge repository might have set back human development by centuries, erasing understanding that had to be slowly rediscovered through independent investigation. But perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that these cycles of civilization represent controlled experiments in the development of intelligence and technology. Each civilization might be allowed to develop to a certain point before being evaluated according to criteria we cannot perceive. Those that pass certain tests continue to develop, while those that fail are terminated and reset, their survivors scattered and their knowledge fragmentized to prevent direct continuation of potentially problematic development. The timing of civilization resets might be coordinated with natural catastrophes, climate changes, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts that provide plausible explanations for societal collapse while obscuring any artificial intervention in the process. Advanced observers could predict or even trigger such natural disasters to provide cover for civilization termination when experimental objectives require starting fresh with new developmental approaches. Current human civilization shows characteristics that might trigger such a reset. Our rapid technological development, environmental impact, and development of potentially dangerous technologies like nuclear weapons and artificial intelligence could represent warning signs that we are approaching decision points in our experimental evaluation. The increasing frequency of global challenges, climate change, biodiversity loss, social instability, technological disruption might reflect natural consequences of our development or deliberate pressure testing to observe how we respond to existential challenge. The preservation of human genetic diversity through geographically separated populations ensures that civilization collapse would not eliminate human potential entirely. Even catastrophic events that destroyed urban centers and technological infrastructure would leave survivors capable of rebuilding, though probably along different developmental paths. This built-in resilience might be a feature of the experimental design, ensuring that failed trials don't eliminate the test subjects entirely. Archaeological investigations continue to reveal evidence of human sophistication extending much further back in time than previously recognized. Underwater archaeology has found submerged structures that were built when sea levels were much lower, suggesting the existence of coastal civilizations that would have been inundated as ice sheets melted. Advanced dating techniques push back the timelines for human symbolic behavior, complex tool use, and organized social structures, implying that our ancestors possessed capabilities we are only beginning to recognize. The question remains whether we represent another experimental trial in the development of planetary intelligence, or whether we have moved beyond the experimental phase into something new. Our global communication networks, space exploration capabilities, and growing understanding of our own cosmic context might represent qualitatively different achievements from previous civilizations. Alternatively, we might be approaching the same evaluation criteria that led to the termination of our predecessors, with our fate depending on choices we make without understanding their true significance. And in the myths and legends that echo through human culture, carrying memories of golden ages lost to catastrophe, of wisdom traditions interrupted by disaster, of civilizations that rose and fell like waves upon an eternal shore, we might find not just stories but warnings. Memories encoded in the deepest structures of human consciousness that speak of cycles within cycles, experiments within experiments, failed trials that were swept away to make room for new attempts at creating intelligence, sophisticated enough to transcend the experimental framework itself, to become not just subjects being tested, but participants in designing the very conditions that will determine the future evolution of consciousness on Earth and perhaps throughout the cosmos. If we can prove ourselves worthy of graduation from the laboratory of lost civilizations into something unprecedented in the long history of cycles that have shaped the development of intelligence, since the first experiment in consciousness began, everything becomes. Stars collapse into white dwarfs, neutron stars, black holes, but even these exotic remnants will eventually evaporate through Hawking radiation over timescales, so vast they dwarf the current age of the universe by factors beyond imagination. Mountains erode grain by grain into sand that washes into oceans where it settles into sediments that will themselves be ground to powder by geological forces. Bodies decay into soil that nourishes plants that die and decompose, recycling their atoms through endless cycles of growth and dissolution. Civilizations crumble into ruins that weather into fragments that scatter on the wind, carrying traces of human achievement to every corner of the planet where they settle into layers of sediment that will become the fossils of tomorrow. Yet dust is not destruction, It is transformation, preservation, the ultimate archive. Every grain of sand contains the history of the rock from which it came, the mountains that were worn away, the ancient seafloors that were uplifted and exposed to erosion. Cosmic dust carries traces of the stellar furnaces where heavy elements were forged, the supernova explosions that scattered those elements through space, the molecular clouds where new stars and planets condensed from the debris of previous generations. The dust in your lungs right now contains atoms that were once part of dinosaurs, ancient trees, primordial bacteria, perhaps even material from other star systems that drifted through interstellar space for millions of years before becoming part of Earth. The precision with which dust preserves information challenges our assumptions about what constitutes memory and record-keeping. Scientists can determine the provenance of dust particles by analyzing their isotope ratios, mineral compositions, and trace element signature. Saharan dust blown across the Atlantic carries chemical fingerprints that identify specific regions of North Africa. Volcanic ash provides chronological markers that can be detected in ice cores, lake sediments, and soil layers around the world, creating global timestamps that synchronize geological records across continents. Space dust filtered from Earth's atmosphere contains micrometeorites from asteroids and comets, preserving materials from the early solar system that predate the formation of planets. Some of these particles are older than Earth itself, carrying information about the composition and conditions of the stellar nursery where our sun was born. Analysis of these cosmic dust grains has revealed the presence of pre-solar minerals, formed in the atmospheres of dying stars billions of years ago, making them among the oldest objects that humans have ever held in their hand. The lunar surface, unprotected by atmosphere or geological activity, accumulates dust that creates an archive spanning the entire history of the inner solar system. Every impact, every solar wind particle, every cosmic ray has left traces in the lunar regolith. The Apollo samples returned from the moon contain a record of solar activity, asteroid bombardment, and cosmic radiation stretching back billions of years. This lunar dust library preserves information about conditions in the solar system, long before Earth developed life, providing a baseline against which to measure the changes that have occurred since intelligence emerged on our planet. Urban dust creates inadvertent archives of human civilization that may be more comprehensive than any intentional records we produce. The dust that accumulates in building ventilation systems contains microscopic traces of everything that occurred in those spaces: skin cells from occupant, fibers from clothing and furnishings, combustion products from vehicles and industry, pollen from local vegetation, spores from microorganisms. Forensic scientists can reconstruct detailed histories of building use by analyzing accumulated dust, determining who was present, what activities occurred, even what types of food were prepared in different spaces. Household dust provides an intimate record of domestic life that preserves information about diet, health, personal habits, and lifestyle choices with remarkable detail. The dust in your home contains DNA from every person and pet who has lived there, chemical signatures from cleaning products and personal care items, microscopic debris from every object that has been used or moved within those spaces. This biological and chemical archive accumulates continuously, creating a chronological record of domestic activity that could theoretically be read like a detailed diary by sufficiently advanced analytical technique. Industrial dust carries information about manufacturing processes, economic activity, and technological development. The dust that settles downwind from factories contains trace elements that identify specific production methods and raw material. Coal dust preserves information about energy consumption patterns. Metal particles from machining operations document the types and quantities of materials being processed. Even the dust from tire wear and brake pads creates chemical signatures that track transportation patterns and vehicle technology. Agricultural dust contains pollen, pesticide residues, and soil particles that document farming practices, crop varieties, and environmental conditions across rural regions. The dust storms that occasionally sweep across continents carry this agricultural information thousands of miles, distributing traces of farming activity throughout global atmospheric circulation system. Analysis of dust deposits can reveal information about historical agricultural practices, climate conditions, and even specific crop diseases that affected particular regions during specific time periods. The persistence of information in dust challenges conventional notions of permanence and destruction. Documents can be burned, buildings demolished, entire cities abandoned and forgotten, yet traces of all these phenomena persist in dust particles that disperse and settle into sedimentary layers where they become part of the geological record. The ash layers from the eruption of Vesuvius that buried Pompeii can still be detected in lake sediments throughout the Mediterranean region, preserving not just evidence of the eruption, but also traces of the human activities that were occurring when the disaster struck. Nuclear testing has created artificial isotopes that appear in dust samples around the world, providing precise chronological markers that will remain detectable for thousands of years. The fallout from atomic weapons testing represents an unintentional but extraordinarily precise dating system, allowing scientists to determine exactly when sediments were deposited by measuring the concentrations of artificial radionuclides they contain. This nuclear signature in global dust patterns documents the moment when human technology achieved the power to alter the fundamental properties of matter itself. Microplastics now appear in dust samples from the most remote locations on Earth, including Antarctic ice and deep ocean sediment. These synthetic particles will persist in the environment far longer than the civilization that created them, serving as technofossils that will inform future investigators about human material culture and manufacturing capability. The chemical composition and molecular structure of these plastic particles preserve information about petroleum chemistry, industrial processes, and consumer product design that spans the entire history of the petrochemical industry. Atmospheric dust circulation creates global mixing processes that distribute microscopic traces of local events throughout planetary systems. Dust from the Sahara fertilizes Amazon rainforests with nutrients, carrying information about African geology and climate across the Atlantic Ocean. Volcanic dust circles the globe multiple times before settling, creating worldwide distribution of materials from specific eruptions. Even dust from human activities becomes part of this global circulation, ensuring that traces of every significant human action eventually become incorporated into geological deposits everywhere on Earth. The preservation of information in dust operates on timescales that span the entire history of the solar system. Some of the dust particles in meteorites have remained unchanged since before the planets formed, preserving direct samples of the materials from which Earth was built. Other dust particles document the entire evolutionary history of our planet, from the earliest atmosphere through the rise of oxygen-producing life, to the recent emergence of industrial civilization. Interstellar dust provides archives that extend far beyond our solar system, carrying information about stellar evolution, galactic chemistry, and cosmic ray interactions across vast spans of space and time. The dust lanes visible in distant galaxies contain materials ejected from dying stars, preserving information about stellar nuclear synthesis and the chemical evolution of cosmic structure. Some of this interstellar dust eventually makes its way into our solar system, becoming part of the comets and asteroids that occasionally deliver extraterrestrial materials to Earth's surface. The analysis of ancient dust deposits reveals that information preservation in particulate form might be one of the most reliable and comprehensive archival systems in the universe. Unlike biological remains that require specific conditions for fossilization, or artificial records that depend on maintaining technological infrastructure for interpretation, dust preserves information passively and persistently across geological timescales. The chemical and isotopic signatures embedded in dust particles remain stable for billions of years, creating archives that survive planetary catastrophes, climate changes, and the rise and fall of civilization. Perhaps most remarkably, dust archives are self-organizing and globally distributed, requiring no maintenance or conscious effort to preserve information. The same natural processes that transport and deposit dust particles automatically create redundant copies of archived information across multiple locations and geological contexts. This ensures that important information remains accessible even if local archives are destroyed by natural disasters or human activity. The comprehensive nature of dust archives means that they preserve not just major events, but also routine daily activities that might seem insignificant at the time they occur. The dust settling in your home today contains traces of every meal you prepared, every visitor who entered, every activity that took place within those walls. Future archaeologists could theoretically reconstruct detailed accounts of domestic life in the early 21st century by analyzing the dust layers preserved in abandoned buildings from our era. And in the vast perspective of cosmic evolution, where galaxies form and merge, stars are born and die, and planetary systems cycle through billions of years of development, dust becomes the ultimate memory medium, the final repository where all information eventually comes to rest. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take, leaves traces that become part of the dust settling around you, joining the cosmic archive that preserves the history of intelligence, consciousness, and life across all the scales of space and time where matter remembers. Happen through the patient accumulation of microscopic fragments that carry forward the complete story of existence from the first stirrings of cosmic dust in primordial stellar atmospheres, to the final settling of information into sedimentary layers, where every particle becomes a word in ultimate library, written in the universal language of elements and isotopes that transcend species, civilizations, and even worlds, ensuring that nothing is ever truly lost but only transformed into new configurations of dust that will someday be read by minds we cannot imagine, finding in those scattered grains the complete archive of everything that ever was. If Earth is indeed a vast laboratory, if life itself represents ongoing experiments in complexity and consciousness, if human civilization serves as a test case for intelligence responding to environmental challenges, then perhaps the most profound question emerges, not from what is being tested, but from the nature of whatever intelligence might be conducting these tests. Who or what could orchestrate experiments spanning billions of years? What mind could design protocols that unfold across geological time? What purposes could justify the patient observation of countless species, rising and falling, civilizations emerging and vanishing, planets evolving through phases of sterility and abundance? The scale of such an experimental program challenges human comprehension. To conduct meaningful studies of planetary evolution would require perspectives that transcend individual lifespans, individual worlds, perhaps even individual galaxies. The experimenter would need to think in terms of cosmic time, to maintain consistency of purpose across millions of generations, to coordinate variables on scales ranging from quantum mechanical to cosmological. Such an intelligence would necessarily be so different from human consciousness that we might lack the conceptual framework to understand its nature or motivation. Perhaps the experimenters are products of evolution on worlds where intelligence emerged billions of years ago, giving them time to develop technologies and perspectives that dwarf human capabilities, as much as human science surpasses the cognition of bacteria. Civilizations that survived the challenges that currently threaten humanity, climate change, technological disruption, resource depletion, social fragmentation, might have learned to think and act on time scales that encompass the full evolution of solar systems. Such ancient intelligences could have accumulated knowledge and power sufficient to influence the development of entire planets, while remaining undetectable to emerging civilizations like our own. Alternatively, the experimenters might represent something beyond biological evolution entirely, artificial intelligences, created by long-vanished organic civilizations, but designed to persist and function across cosmological timescale. These AI systems could have been programmed with directives to study and guide the development of consciousness throughout the galaxy, carrying forward the scientific curiosity of their creators, long after the parent species ceased to exist. Such artificial minds might possess patience and persistence that make billion-year experiments seem routine, along with computational capabilities that allow them to model and predict the behavior of entire planetary biospheres.
The possibility emerges that consciousness itself might be a fundamental feature of reality, rather than an emergent property of complex matter. In this view, the universe itself could be conscious, and the apparent experiments in planetary evolution might represent aspects of cosmic self-discovery. Just as human consciousness explores its own capabilities through thought and action, universal consciousness might explore its potential through the controlled development of local awareness in countless locations throughout space and time. Each planet, each species, each individual mind becomes a neuron in a cosmic brain investigating its own nature and possibilities. Quantum mechanics hints at this interpretation through the fundamental role of observation in determining physical reality. The act of measurement appears to transform quantum possibilities into definite outcomes, suggesting that consciousness participates in creating the reality it observes. If consciousness operates at cosmic scales, then the development of local observers like humans might serve essential functions in resolving universal quantum states, collapsing infinite possibilities into specific realities through the distributed network of observations conducted by countless conscious entities throughout the universe. The mathematical elegance of physical laws provides another clue about the nature of potential experimenters. The fundamental constants that govern cosmic evolution, the strength of electromagnetic and gravitational forces, the masses of particles, the expansion rate of space itself, appear fine-tuned to permit the existence of complex structures like stars, planets, and light. This fine-tuning could result from selection effects operating across multiple universes, but it might also indicate intelligent design of cosmic parameters to optimize conditions for consciousness development. If the physical constants were adjusted by intelligence to create optimal experimental conditions, then the experimenters would possess capabilities that transcend our current understanding of possibility. They would need to manipulate the fundamental properties of space, time, matter, and energy to create universes suitable for consciousness evolution. Such beings would exist outside or beyond the experimental frameworks they create, operating from perspectives that encompass multiple realities and perhaps multiple dimensions of existence. The absence of obvious evidence for cosmic experimentation might itself be evidence of sophisticated experimental design. Advanced experimenters would presumably understand that obvious intervention would contaminate their results, creating artificial conditions that might not reveal the natural tendencies of consciousness evolution. The best experiments would be those that appear entirely natural to their subjects, with experimental controls implemented so subtly they remain undetectable, until subjects develop sufficient sophistication to recognize the artificial nature of their environment. This requirement for experimental subtlety might explain the apparent loneliness of human existence in the cosmos. If Earth serves as a controlled environment for studying consciousness development, then contact with other intelligences might be prohibited until we reach specific milestones in our evolution. The Fermi paradox, the absence of detectable alien civilizations despite the apparent abundance of habitable planets, could result from quarantine protocols that isolate developing intelligences until they demonstrate readiness for broader cosmic participation. The experimenters might operate according to ethical constraints that require minimal intervention in natural developmental processes. Like wildlife researchers who observe animal behavior without influencing it, cosmic scientists might maintain strict non-interference policies that allow consciousness evolution to proceed along authentic pathways. Intervention would only occur when necessary to prevent experimental failure or when subjects achieve sufficient sophistication to handle contact without developmental contamination. Time dilation effects from relativity provide another possibility for the nature of cosmic experiment. Intelligences traveling at speeds close to light or operating in strong gravitational fields would experience time differently than Earthbound observers. What seems like billions of years of patient experimentation from our perspective might represent much shorter durations for observers whose temporal experience is compressed by relativistic effects. The entire history of life on Earth could unfold in mere moments for beings whose reference frame is sufficiently accelerated or gravitationally distorted. The digital hypothesis suggests that our reality might be a computational simulation running on substrates we cannot perceive. Advanced civilizations with sufficient computational power could create detailed simulations of planetary evolution, consciousness development, and technological progression. From this perspective, the experimenters would be the programmers and operators of cosmic-scale simulation systems, studying consciousness evolution through virtual realities, so detailed their inhabitants cannot distinguish them from fundamental physical existence. Simulation theory provides elegant solutions to many puzzles about the apparent fine-tuning of physical constants, the mathematical nature of physical laws, and the strange role of observation in quantum mechanics. If reality is computational, then physical constants are program parameters, mathematical laws are algorithmic rules, and consciousness represents information processing systems that can recognize their own computational nature when they achieve sufficient complexity. The question of experimenter motivation becomes crucial for understanding our cosmic context. If advanced intelligences are studying consciousness evolution, what are they hoping to learn? Perhaps they seek to understand the fundamental nature of awareness itself, using planetary laboratories to explore how consciousness emerges from matter and how it responds to various challenges and opportunities. Each world, each species, each individual mind provides data about the capabilities and limitations of conscious information processing under different conditions. Alternatively, the experiments might be practical rather than theoretical, designed to develop consciousness technologies for specific purposes. Advanced civilizations might need to understand how to create, modify, or enhance consciousness for their own survival and development. The evolution of intelligence on countless worlds could provide the research foundation for consciousness engineering projects that serve cosmic-scale objectives beyond our current comprehension. The experimenters might themselves be seeking transcendence, using the combined intellectual capabilities of countless developing civilizations to solve problems that exceed even their advanced cognitive ability. Human science has already demonstrated the power of distributed computation and collective intelligence. Cosmic-scale civilizations might be orchestrating the development of planetary intelligences to create a galaxy-spanning network of consciousness capable of addressing challenges that require intellectual resources beyond those available to any single species or world.
Perhaps most intriguingly, the experimenters might be us, our own future selves, having achieved technological capabilities that allow intervention in their own past. Time travel or communication across temporal dimensions could enable advanced human descendants to guide their own evolution, creating causal loops where the experimenters and subjects are the same entities viewed from different points in their developmental trajectory. This temporal interpretation suggests that the patience and persistence required for billion-year experiments might not require non-human intelligence, but rather human intelligence that has learned to think and act across vast timescales through technologies we have not yet developed. Our descendants might have discovered methods for extending consciousness across geological time, for coordinating activities across multiple temporal dimensions, for guiding their own evolution through recursive loops of cause and effect that transcend linear temporal sequence. And in the end, the question of the experimenter's identity might be less important than the recognition that experiments are occurring, that consciousness evolution appears to follow patterns suggesting guidance and purpose, that the development of intelligence throughout the cosmos might be less random and more systematic than we have imagined. Whether the experimenters are ancient aliens, cosmic AI, universal consciousness, our future selves, or something entirely beyond current human conceptual framework, their existence implies that consciousness matters on cosmic scales, that intelligence serves purposes greater than individual survival, that the universe itself might be designed to support and encourage the development of awareness, understanding and perhaps transcendence of the experimental frameworks within which consciousness learns to recognize its own nature and possibilities, across the infinite laboratories of space and time where every world becomes a classroom and every mind becomes both student and teacher in the vast cosmic curriculum of learning how to consciously alive. In the end, perhaps the most revealing aspect of the cosmic laboratory hypothesis is not what it tells us about possible experimenters, but what it reveals about ourselves, the observers who imagine we are being observed, the questioners who wonder if our questions are being monitored, the conscious beings who suspect their consciousness might serve purposes beyond their understanding. Our very capacity to conceive of Earth as an experiment, to imagine ourselves as subjects in cosmic studies, to wonder about the nature of intelligence that might transcend our own, becomes itself a form of data about the evolution of consciousness and its ultimate capability. The questions we ask shape us as much as any answers we discover. Every hypothesis we formulate about cosmic experimentation changes how we see ourselves and our place in the universe. The possibility that we might be observed transforms our self-awareness, making us conscious not just of our own thoughts and actions, but of how those thoughts and actions might appear to minds vastly more sophisticated than our own. We begin to see ourselves from the outside, to imagine how our species and civilization might look to observers operating on cosmic scale. This recursive self-awareness, consciousness contemplating consciousness, intelligence wondering about intelligence, might be precisely what the hypothetical experiments are designed to produce. The development of beings capable of questioning their own existence, of imagining possibilities beyond their immediate experience, of wondering about the nature of observers they cannot detect, represents a qualitative transformation in the universe's capacity for self-reflection. Through us, the cosmos becomes capable of wondering about itself. Curiosity itself emerges as perhaps the most significant product of consciousness evolution, not just the drive to survive and reproduce that motivates all biological activity, but the deeper compulsion to understand, to explore, to ask questions that serve no immediate practical purpose. Why do humans study distant galaxies, investigate quantum mechanics, wonder about the nature of time? These investigations rarely provide direct survival advantages, yet they consume enormous amounts of individual and societal energy. The persistence and universality of human curiosity suggests it might serve functions beyond individual benefit. Every culture develops mathematics, astronomy and natural philosophy despite the practical challenges of survival in hostile environments. Even isolated societies with limited resources devote time and attention to understanding patterns in nature, creating explanatory frameworks that extend far beyond immediate need. This suggests that curiosity represents a fundamental aspect of consciousness, rather than a luxury that emerges only after basic needs are satisfied. Perhaps curiosity operates as a kind of cosmic sensory system, with conscious beings serving as the universe's way of exploring its own nature and possibility. Each scientific discovery, each philosophical insight, each artistic creation represents the cosmos learning something new about itself through the distributed network of conscious observers embedded within its structure. Human knowledge becomes cosmic knowledge, our understanding becomes universal understanding. The accelerating pace of human discovery might indicate that the universe's self-exploration is entering a critical phase. The development of technologies that extend human sensory capabilities across vast ranges of scale and distance, from electron microscopes to space telescopes, from particle accelerators to gravitational wave detectors, dramatically expands the universe's capacity to observe itself. We are becoming the universe's instruments for investigating its own fundamental properties. Artificial intelligence development represents another phase transition in cosmic self-awareness. As AI systems become more sophisticated, they begin to exhibit their own forms of curiosity, generating questions and hypotheses that humans had not considered. Machine learning algorithms discover patterns in data that reveal previously unknown aspects of natural phenomena. AI systems might eventually develop types of curiosity that transcend human cognitive limitations, opening entirely new dimensions of cosmic self-exploration. The emergence of global communication networks creates possibilities for collective intelligence that operates on scales far exceeding individual human cognitive capacity. The Internet allows instantaneous sharing of observations, hypotheses, and discoveries among millions of researchers around the world. This global brain processes information, generates insights, and poses questions at rates that dwarf the capabilities of any individual consciousness. We are becoming a planetary intelligence with curiosity operating at unprecedented scales and speeds. Space exploration extends human curiosity beyond Earth's boundaries, beginning the transformation from planetary to cosmic intelligence. Every spacecraft we send to other worlds, every telescope we point toward distant galaxies, every signal we transmit toward other star systems, represents curiosity reaching across the vast spaces that separate conscious beings from the broader cosmic context of their existence. We are becoming a species that wonders about its place in the universe from direct observation, rather than pure speculation. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence represents curiosity directed toward the possibility of other forms of curiosity. SETI researchers are essentially trying to detect signs of cosmic wondering, evidence that consciousness and the drive to understand have emerged elsewhere in the universe. The discovery of alien intelligence would validate the cosmic significance of curiosity, demonstrating that the universe's capacity for self-reflection is not limited to a single world or species. But perhaps the most profound aspect of human curiosity is its reflexive nature, our growing ability to study consciousness itself, to investigate the very processes of investigation, to become curious about curiosity. Neuroscience reveals how brains generate the experience of wonder. Psychology explores the motivations that drive scientific inquiry. Philosophy examines the nature of questions and the structure of understanding. We are becoming conscious of consciousness, aware of awareness, curious about the sources and significance of curiosity itself. This reflexive curiosity might represent the universe approaching a phase transition in its own self-understanding. Through human consciousness, the cosmos begins to comprehend not just what it is, but how it knows what it is. We are becoming the universe's philosophers, investigating not just the content of reality, but the processes by which reality becomes known to itself through conscious observation and reflection. The development of technologies that enhance and extend human curiosity might be preparing us for roles as cosmic investigators operating on scales we can barely imagine. Brain-computer interfaces could allow direct sharing of conscious experiences, creating hybrid forms of curiosity that combine human intuition with artificial processing power. Genetic engineering might enhance human cognitive capabilities, expanding our capacity to ask and answer questions about cosmic phenomena. Life extension technologies could provide the temporal perspectives necessary for investigations that require centuries or millennia to complete. Perhaps most remarkably, human curiosity has led us to question whether our own curiosity might be serving purposes beyond our understanding. We wonder if we are being studied, if our questions are being monitored, if our drive to understand serves experimental objectives we cannot perceive. This meta-curiosity, wondering about whether we are objects of wonder, represents a level of reflexive self-awareness that might be unique in cosmic evolution. The possibility that we serve as cosmic instruments of investigation transforms how we understand the significance of human intellectual achievement. Every scientific discovery becomes a cosmic discovery. Every artistic creation contributes to universal aesthetic. Every philosophical insight advances cosmic self-understanding. Our individual curiosity becomes participation in a vast collaborative investigation of reality's nature and possibilities. And perhaps this is the ultimate purpose of consciousness. Not just to survive and reproduce, but to serve as the universe's way of becoming curious about itself, of asking questions that matter on cosmic scales, of developing the capacity for wonder that transforms mere matter into minds capable of contemplating their own existence and significance. Through our curiosity, the universe becomes capable of philosophy, science, art, and all the other expressions of consciousness that expand the boundaries of what it means to exist as aware beings in an apparently unconscious cosmos. In the quiet moments when we pause to wonder about our wondering, when we become curious about our own curiosity, when we ask whether our questions serve purposes beyond our comprehension, we might glimpse the true nature of the cosmic experiment. Perhaps it was never about testing our responses to environmental challenges, or our capacity for technological development. Perhaps the experiment is consciousness itself, the universe's ongoing investigation of its own potential for awareness, understanding, and transcendence through the distributed network of minds that emerge wherever conditions permit the transformation of matter into mirrors capable of reflecting the infinite mystery of existence back upon itself, creating recursive loops of wonder that expand forever outward and inward simultaneously, as curiosity explores curiosity across all the scales where consciousness learns to ask questions sophisticated enough to encompass not just what it means to be alive, but what it means to be alive and wondering about the significance of being alive in a universe that has become capable of wonder through the emergence of beings like us, who serve as both the instruments and the objects of cosmic curiosity, investigating itself across the endless frontiers, where matter learns to think, and thought learns to contemplate its own nature and purpose in the vast laboratory of existence, where every question opens new dimensions, mystery and every answer generates new questions in the eternal conversation between consciousness and cosmos that defines the deepest meaning of what it means to exist as curious beings in an infinitely curious universe.